And we're live. Welcome to another episode or live streamer interview. The first ever interview we have going on so far. Um, Hopefully we'll do a little bit more. But tonight, we are interviewing Josh Golladay. I'm pretty sure I just butchered his name. He's in chat or geez Louise, words are hard. Today's not my day apparently, but without further ado, I'm just gonna bring him on if I can find my mouse. Got Josh. Did I butcher your last name?
We were real close.
Real close?
I've heard people do way worse with it, so you're good. No worries. Yeah, Golladay.
Okay. Yeah. We were just backstage, and I literally, like, half of these I can't pronounce except for the two of the bottles I actually have, which are Hubris and oh man, I'm
Harbinger.
Harbinger. There we go. I'm brain farting mad right now. Hanging AZ in the house. Cheers. Yep. Welcome. And Hanging AZ. I don't know if you've met Patrick yet, but we're also bringing on I like to refer to him as the Ironroot legend of the Arizona whiskey community. We got Patrick in the house.
Our main man out there in Arizona.
Yeah, yes. I like good whiskey.
Borderline the Ironroot Bass and Batter brand ambassador for Arizona. Jeez Louise, words are hard. So, Josh, for those of people who are in chat who don't know you or whatever, run through your little spiel, your little short bio.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of want to give a quick rundown on the distillery itself and then kind of how I got involved in it.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So Ironroot Republic's it's a family-owned, award-winning craft distillery out of Denison, Texas, where I'm at now, talking to you guys from about 3 minutes down the road from the distillery. We just moved up here a few weeks ago, about 5 weeks ago. So we're really, really close by, which is pretty awesome to be that close to such a cool distillery and so close to work as well.
Yeah, that's convenient.
yeah, it's very, very handy. So we're best known for using a combination of kind of old world French maturation and blending techniques and using a lot of heirloom grains that are grown mostly locally around 50, 60 miles around the distillery. As much as we can possibly source locally, we do. So everybody's heard about the intense climate for maturing spirits here in Texas. Of course, we have ways of managing that to get the kind of results that we want out of our bourbon and create some new and unique, interesting styles of American whiskey. So about 2011, two crazy brothers, Robert and Jonathan Licorice, who Patrick and I know very, very well at this point, decided to drop out of law school for Robert, and Jonathan was working as a biomedical engineer at the time, and they decided, let's just throw all that out by the wayside and pursue distilling. After a trip to a few American distilleries like Dry Fly Distilling, they always reference that as kind of an inspiration for them getting started. So they traveled around the country, and they traveled abroad to France and spent some time over there in Cognac and Armagnac in France, learning everything that they could learn, both about American whiskey distilling and then old world kind of European distilling traditions, before finally deciding to settle down here in far north Texas. Are you familiar with where Denison is?
Not even remotely. I don't know where as far as my geography skills go, I pretty much know where every state is in reference to each other, and that's about it.
Okay, yeah, most people don't know where Denison's at, so it's about as far north as you can possibly get in Texas before you get to Oklahoma. So we say you just drive north, and then when you see Oklahoma, you hit the brakes, and then the distillery is going to be on your right-hand side. So when they finally decided to open up the distillery to the public, it was about 2014. They decided that is a lot to deal with, and they needed somebody to help them out, so they brought in their mother, Marcia, who still is the distillery manager to this day and affectionately known throughout the Texas distilling community as the mother of Texas whiskey. We also have their father, John, retired recently, kind of joined the team. And then cousin Alex. We also got Ashley over there. That's really just a small, tight-knit group, mostly direct family running the place. So yeah, that's kind of the short history of how they got started. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what kind of goes into the spirits as we try some of the crazy number of samples that Patrick put together for you.
Yeah, straight ridiculous.
He's a generous man, that one.
Yeah, I have like 2.5 bottles of whiskey worth of samples in front of me, all from Ironroot, all with crazy names I can hardly pronounce because that just ain't my game. But I'm excited to get into some of these. Patrick, if you want to do a short little rundown of who you are in the Arizona whiskey community, because I feel like you can describe yourself better than I can, because I'm a little bit newer. I started this whole YouTube thing, and then I got into the Arizona whiskey community before, I wish I had done that before I got into this whole YouTubing thing, because I would have been way better at it before then, but it is what it is.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, Patrick Cohn, I've been enjoying whiskey for a few years, and actually
a few.
Yeah, well, a few. But I was actually more into another group called the Whiskey Tribe. They're more of a national. They have the 2 largest YouTube channels, and then they have their own whiskey group. And I was involved in that, and that's actually through that is how I met Josh and the Licorishes. But then I started looking in Arizona to see if there were groups here, and I'd already got to meet a few people like Ben Rhodes, who does a lot of glassware and etching and stuff. That's awesome. And then, one day he invited me into the Arizona Whiskey Community Facebook page, and I've gotten to know quite a few individuals because of that, and shared quite a bit of whiskey and enjoyed quite a bit of whiskey with others.
Yeah, what do you think? It's been maybe 6 years or so ago I met you, Patrick?
Yeah, I think so. Right? Yeah, and it's kind of funny because him and his wife Gretchen they had their own with some other friends YouTube channel.
Yeah,
and they were headed up to interview the Licorishes, and they stuck around an extra day because I was coming into town, and we met up at Crowded Barrel and hung out for a while, and then they headed north, and it's been kind of a storied history since then. We regularly meet up either in Austin or at Ironroot itself, as we tend to take vacations together and go up there, and you spend our vacations working for Distillery. Now it'll be even easier since Josh works for the Distillery, that it'll be a much quicker and easier system.
Yeah, no, I think it's one where I don't know if you so much get vacation from working for a distillery. It's more of a lifestyle than a job. You know what I mean? It's all the time.
Your job is kind of like the vacation. If you do what you love, you don't have to work a day in your life.
That's what
that's actually what it is, because you don't get to sit around. The Licorishes work you hard. And one time we were there, we bottled like 2,400 bottles in a week between Josh, Gretchen, and I.
Yeah, I spent a whole week doing it. Like 4 bottles at a time by hand. That was crazy.
Yeah,
we can do it a little more
bottles.
Oh yeah.
But no, that's a great point. I hadn't really thought back on it. I'm glad you mentioned, and we did the YouTube thing for a little while and involved in these whiskey groups on Facebook and stuff. That's really how I came into it. Is really just a fan. Way back in the day, I was a big fan of craft beer. When I lived in Austin, I was enjoyed the craft beer scene there, and started getting interested in spirits after a while, and visited a lot of the local distilleries. Got to know a lot of the folks there, who were such a fantastic community and awesome people. Still to this day, some of the folks that I consider good friends that I met during that period of time. And at one point I heard about this place called Ironroot, and happened to run into Jonathan, one of the owners at a whiskey festival, and didn't think too much of it for a little while. And then somehow it came back in my head, I need to try those guys. I haven't had any of their whiskey. And I went to a Total Wine and found a bottle of Promethean, was the first one that I bought, and and posted some thoughts on a Facebook group, and all of a sudden Robert Licorice jumps into he slides into my DMs, on Facebook, and says, "Hey man, I appreciate you checking us out and what you had to say, and come up and visit us sometime." And well, I did, and then I spent all day there, and then they just couldn't get rid of me after that. So
Yeah,
and that's kind of how I met you through. I think I was live streaming, and Patrick messaged me saying that he was playing one of my reviews on the TV in the distillery, and I was like, "Wait, what? Why are people watching my reviews? Why are important people doing that?"
No, when you reached out wanting to do this, man, I was like, absolutely. Anybody that has an interest in what we're doing and kind things to say as you did, I've got all the time in the world to hang out and share Ironroot whiskey with you, man. So I appreciate you putting this together and having us on and bringing in Patrick as well. So
yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, so out of the bottles or samples, I guess, I have in front of me, which ones would you like to get into? Because I am overwhelmed at this point. By the way, Patrick, I've never seen someone do samples like this where, come on, autofocus camera. There we go. Where it's like printed label maker. Like this is like official, like, hey, the distillery sent you these samples type of stuff. But he just put this together like randomly in one day.
Patrick sets the standard for whiskey samples.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers,
Ironroot. Best whiskey
so
from
much.
Texas.
I appreciate that.
Do you guys do single barrel picks?
We do. It's become a little harder to do that as we've gotten more popular. As people have interest in the distillery and want to buy the whiskey, which is amazing, and we're so grateful that people are paying attention to what we're doing down here. We just need to make more of it, but that takes time, of course, with whiskey.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's not one of those distilleries or spirits that goes over really quickly. You got to put in the time for the quality.
Right. Absolutely. It takes a little bit of time to catch up with whiskey. So I did see another question, holding a bottle of Tri-Barrel Hazmat. So there is a Hazmat Harbinger coming out. It's not released yet. We bottled a little bit of it to bring to a whiskey festival in Austin with the Whiskey Tribe guys at Wizard Academy there. So it will be upcoming. Keep your eye on the newsletter. If you're not getting that already, go to the website and sign up for it. But yeah, it will be coming out. It'll be a small release, a lottery type situation, but definitely get your name in there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I've put in my name for every single lottery you've released. Patrick, what were you saying?
And you do actually have a single barrel as one of your samples. As a matter of fact, it is the single barrel that
Bourbon
was
Charity.
done by Arizona, where Bourbon Charity, based here in the Valley, I believe it was their first single barrel. So they, it's I'm your Huckleberry specifically for Doc Golladay. And I later found out that there's actually a connection between Denison and Arizona for Doc Golladay, because Doc Golladay actually had a practice in Denison, Texas, before he moved to Arizona and became famous for the gunfight at OK Corral.
So Denison, Texas, because obviously we've stated I know nothing about geography, is we're going to use a fancy word here, terroir, or like the environment around you. Is it similar to the rest of Texas where it's just hot as hell?
It's a little bit cooler up here, and we have a large lake nearby as well. So some of the, just the humidity and the barometric pressure and the average temperature and stuff like that is a little bit different than, say, distilleries in the hill country area. But yes, still, it's very much a Texas environment, even in spite of that. So it gets pretty dang hot. We get big temperature swings, and that's a big contributor, as well as all the environmental factors that go along with maturing whiskey in Texas. So we have interesting different ways of managing that, and that's kind of a hands-on process. You mentioned terroir. which is sort of a wine term, a French term of
Mhm.
the taste of a place, right? That the wine should taste like where it comes from. In whiskey, it's a little bit different because you can, grains are grown in a particular place. They may taste a little different than from somewhere else, but now we're putting it through a distilling process and we're aging it in barrels. And so there's so many factors involved. I kind of like the term provenance for whiskey because of all those different factors, whether they be agricultural or the scientific process of distilling or the art of maturation and blending and all of those things combined, the human element that goes into that creates kind of a signature style, I think, in the best cases. And it's something I think Ironroot definitely has. Right. So no matter whether you're trying the bourbon or the corn whiskey or even some of the malt whiskey, things like that, like you have the Celt over there, I think is an Irish style whiskey, but it still tastes like it came from Ironroot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and I'm excited for that because I've been a huge fan of the American single malt subsection recently. Like Texas and American single malt have been my two growing collections. Like I have a lot of Texas whiskey now, ever since like a year ago or something, that I finally just started trying out Texas whiskey for the first time, just because I think it's more interesting than Kentucky bourbon. I have enough Kentucky bourbon. There's I don't know, you can only do so much different things with Kentucky bourbon instead, unless if you're finishing them. So I've been getting into Texas and I've been getting into the American single malt, and it's kind of like a amalgamation of both of those as well as Irish whiskey all together because it kind of fits in the same realm. Because it's a malt, right?
Yeah, it's a combination of malted and unmalted barley. But yeah, you're right. We're kind of the weird kids over in the corner doing our own thing down here, I think. Versus, Kentucky, obviously fantastic at what they do. There's some incredible whiskeys that come out of the distilleries there, of course. That goes without question. But there's no sense in trying to replicate that down here, and you're never going to do what they do as well as they do it. So we're just taking a different approach and doing our own thing and trying some interesting experiments and getting into all the fun, crazy, beautiful styles of whiskey that we can make down here.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like you need to do nowadays. Like there's so many distilleries out there, and that's probably why not arguably, you guys are, in my humble opinion, the best Texas distillery I've tried, at least.
That's high praise. Thank you very much.
From what I've tried, Balcones, I like as well. Like the products I like from Balcones, I like on the same level as yours. It's just Balcones, I'm hit or miss with their products. Sure. Where your guys' products, I've yet to be disappointed in any of them.
Well, thank you so much. And the guys at Balcones are fantastic. We have quite a few friends there, and I've been a big fan of their whiskeys for a long time. Of course, Andalusia as well is another one that I'm a huge fan of, and those guys are fantastic, good friends of ours. I mean, I could go down the list, and there's awesome people at making great whiskey all over the state.
Oh yeah. Andalusia, another one I still actually need to try.
Yeah, would highly recommend.
I can get you some samples of that also. All through there is Andalusia.
Oh yeah. Speaking of, Hanging AZ brought up a little while ago in chat, and I missed it. Here we go. Patrick, Hanging AZ, and you guys just became best friends. So
did we just become best friends?
Yeah. How many shelves of whiskey do you have that are just so? He has a whole living room filled with whiskey. Every single shelf is as stacked as all the shelves behind him right now. What, you have maybe 15 shelves in your living room?
He's looking side to side, and he can't see the end of it, actually. It just keeps going and going and going.
There's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 that are 36 inches long, and a couple that are...
See, when you have to math that hard to count how many bottles you have, it's too much. I love it. No, you have...
one of those rabbit holes that just goes down forever.
Oh, I know. And if I could, I probably would have just as much whiskey as you do. But, unfortunately, life ain't like that. But yeah, you have from what I've seen, the most impressive collection that I've seen with my own eyes. You like walk into your house and it's like, okay, wow, hello there. This is a lot to take in.
Yeah. Patrick's one of those guys that is responsible for some of the more insane, incredible, amazing pours I've ever had in my life. It's guys like Patrick, or I count Chris Trevino as the guy that does the Saints Alley product line with us. Has an incredible palate and a whiskey collection, an entire spirits collection he's been building since like the 1980s or something, and it's amazing. So it's always good to have friends with an incredible collection, for sure.
Yeah, he's his like YouTube name's Liquor Hound, right?
Liquor Hound. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know him personally. Speaking of, stay tuned. Another live stream in the future. I'm going to do the Saints Alley live stream where I break down all three of them, because I want to figure out which one's my favorite so I can figure out which one I need to buy, because I've yet to buy one. But now that, Patrick so graciously gave me 3 samples of all the 3 offerings, I feel like I have to rabbit hole deep dive them and figure out which one is the best.
Yeah. Now there's more coming out.
Oh, really?
A few more. Yeah. There's a rye finished in Tokai casks, and then a special edition of the Herald that's finished in both Armagnac and Pinot de Charente cask.
Matter of fact, those come out in 2 days, and they're just going to be dropped on the website at noon Texas on Friday. So it's not a lottery even. You can just fastest fingers.
Okay. Good to know. But so what I want to do before we get into any sort of samples, although I am drinking the Promethean for the first time just because it was like 50% ABV. So yeah. I didn't want to kick it off too hard because I'm seeing like 63, 70%, 70. I've never had hazmat whiskey before. 60.7. So like I'm seeing some high proofs in front of me. So I was like, okay, we'll start off with 50. So I already know this answer for Josh, but for the rest of the audience, I'll still ask it, as well as Patrick. What's your favorite Ironroot whiskey? Like, it doesn't have to be some long-running one. It could be a one-off, spin-off, whatever. What's your favorite one you've had, as well as what's your favorite non-Ironroot whiskey?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. I mean, as far as...
Go ahead, Patrick.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Josh.
For favorite Ironroot whiskey, that's going to be pretty hard to say, but I guess if I were to choose something for that's at least an annual release, right? Something that wasn't a one-off or a single barrel or anything like that. I would probably say Hubris, whether it's the hazmat or the regular one. Personally, I really like that. It showcases the heirloom corn a whole lot without so much oak as a bourbon, of course, because of the refill casks. It's personally the best corn whiskey I've ever had. And it comes off to me always a little bit reminiscent of a Scottish, like a Highland single malt, but obviously with the corn instead of malted barley, right? Just because of the refill cask and the pot distillation. So that it kind of gives me this slight Scotch vibe, but with a totally American style of whiskey. So I really like that. Man, favorite non-Ironroot whiskey. That is a hard question.
I mean, what you probably drink like 90% Ironroot whiskey and then maybe 10% something else.
We like to try all kinds of stuff. When we have people come to the distillery and we try a bunch of different things, but. I guess I would say, one that's near and dear to my heart anyway is Clynelish.
Clynelish, that's Scotch, right?
Yeah, it's Highland Scotch. It's got this really sort of fruity but spicy and also a little waxy. I really like that combo. Of course, it really depends. If you ask me what's my favorite peated whiskey, it'll be a different answer. If you ask me what my favorite, Irish whiskey, it'll be a different answer, of course.
Yeah. It changes every day. I don't think I could personally answer that question.
Yeah.
Like I can answer what's my favorite Ironroot because I only have 2 bottles that are like your standalone bottles. So that's an easy answer for me. But as far as like favorite whiskey, I have no clue.
Sure.
It's an unfair question. How about you, Patrick? What's your favorite Ironroot release?
My favorite Ironroot, I would have to say Icarus. Icarus is so much fun because it's hubris, it's corn whiskey, but they finish it in both port and peat barrels. And kind of to Josh's point about, hubris already has some kind of notes like Scotch. And so it's basically like a finished Scotch. And I enjoy peated Scotch to begin with. So yeah, it's just the fruit of the port and the smoke of the peat goes so well with that hubris corn whiskey that I just really enjoy it. It's one I love going back to. For non iron root, it really depends. If I stay in the U.S., it's Delbach. I love Delbach out of Tucson. I have a ton of their stuff. I've met Steve and Amanda and one of their reps, Tom, and they're just wonderful people, and they are doing some great stuff, and I can't wait to see kind of where it goes from here. If we go outside of the U.S., it's I am a big Compass Box fanboy. Compass Box is a independent bottler, but they're best known for their blending. And they released a series called No Name. The very first No Name is my absolute favorite. I have several backup bottles because I love it so much. It's 75% Ardbeg, and then it's also got, I believe, some Clynelish and a couple other distilleries in there from Scotland, and it's just gorgeous balance.
Yeah. I have yet to try any of their peated ones. I just have a cheaper, what is that called? The Orchid House or whatever from them. But I actually truly love that. That's it's a really nice budget Scotch. That's super good. Like I know everyone loves the whole single malt world or whatever, but I feel like there's also another world where blending is just as quality. You just got to use good products to make your blend. And I feel like that's where the whole blended whiskey gets a bad name, is people just using crappy products. But they're blending good products together and they're making great products.
Yeah, you're starting to see, I mean, those guys have blazed a trail, and you're starting to see even American companies starting to take a little bit of a Compass Box approach to things like that, where, we're not just blending to a lowest common denominator or a low price point or extreme consistency or something like that. We're trying to make high quality, fantastic whiskey. And I think Compass Box really set the tone for that. So yeah, excellent pick, Patrick. I mean, I should have known.
Yeah, blending is such an art form.
If that's a rabbit hole you want to go down with Compass Box, I can definitely help you out with that.
I mean, I will drink or try anything. I have no standards when it comes to trying whiskey. I'll try anything, unless, like, if you tell me it's bad, I'll be like, okay, I'll give it a try. If I know it's bad, I'm like, oh no, I've had that. I'll be like, nah, I'm good. But I'm willing to try everything once. That's my standards. Is I like to explore things. I like to see where things are, especially in the world of whiskey. Like, one thing that someone's gonna hate, I may love. Like one of the guys who got me into whiskey years ago, he despises Scotch. So I stay away from Scotch for the longest time because I was like, oh, Scotch is dirt. That's what he always told me. So I stayed away from it. And then I tried, I think Ardbeg, or Ardbeg 10 for the first time. And I was like, I'm all in. I bought Lefroy 10. I bought Glenmorangie Sherry Finish. And I mean, I don't have the biggest Scotch collection as of yet, but like, it definitely has a place in my heart, and it's here to stay now. So I'm all into trying new things.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can we reveal what we do in our rick houses? Well, besides the black magic, or, well, ginger magic, I guess, rotation or other tricks. That's a great question. I think, so you were drinking the Promethean there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a blend of it's the Hubris and the Harbinger, correct?
That one would be more like esoteric.
Okay, then yeah. You see, I tried looking up what they all were, and then I was like overwhelmed because some are on the website, some aren't, and I was like, oh no.
No worries at all. So you've had Harbinger, right?
Yes, yeah. I've had Harbinger and Hubris, and I know those two well.
Right. So Harbinger is going to be where that one focuses more on our purple corn mash bill and our bloody butcher corn mash bill. And this is going to get into kind of a description of to address what we do in our rick house. It all starts first, we're distilling these heirloom corn varieties. First of all, about 5-10% of the total mash bill will use some of this heirloom corn because it's got enough intensity of flavor. It's almost like a seasoning a steak or something like that. It's the salt and pepper on top of the base of yellow corn, and at times a little bit of a rye, or we distill a bunch of different mash bills, but that heirloom corn is going to be just kind of the flavor accent that we put on it. Those will go typically into totally separate casks, and we have a variety of those, right? So we'll have American oak, European oak, French oak, so on and so forth, right? Most of those are going to be, we have custom 63-gallon casks made for us now, where the industry standard is typically the 53-gallon barrel. We're using 63s pretty much across the board now. Those guys are going to have a heavy toast on the barrel, but an extremely low char. Most of them are going to be like a char number 1. Okay. Part of the reason for that is we want to extract a lot of the sweeter and more fruity notes and things like the more fragrant floral things from the wood without filtering out through too heavy of a char all of that flavor we work to get in from the heirloom corn varieties, right? So now we've got that all in a barrel, variety of mash bills, variety of barrels, and we're going to stack them up in the warehouse. And believe me, they're stacked up right now. I don't know that you could fit another barrel in there right at the moment. It's pretty packed. So those guys, we will adjust the position from time to time. Closer to the doors is going to be a little bit hotter. Closer to the center of the sort of mass of the warehouse, it's going to be a little bit more even of a temperature. Higher, of course, is going to be hotter than lower on the racks, things like that. So we will move them around a little bit from time to time, but really more of that old world French distillation and maturation technique comes into play, where we'll do things like we'll actually add water in cask as the whiskey matures. If it's getting to, first of all, the proof is going to raise over time in general in Texas, right? So we're going to lose water more quickly than we lose alcohol. So proof starts to shoot up, and you're going to pull off different flavors out of the cask at different proofs. So at a higher proof, you're going to be pulling off more tannin, more dryness, more spicy, kind of those aggressive notes. And we want some of that in there. It can't just be all sweet, but that can get to be a little bit overwhelming, a little too dry, too spicy at times. If we drop that proof back down by adding some water and cask, we'll get it to chill out. Those tannins can kind of resolve and mature out over time, and we'll pull some of the sweeter flavors out of the wood at those lower proofs. So that's really a handful. If you're going to say what are our sort of secrets of the warehouse, it's approaches to things like that. I mean, we're always, of course, monitoring the environmental conditions, opening the doors to allow airflow when we need it, things like that. The other thing we've really noticed over time in Texas, for us anyway, is that barrels can change pretty quickly. And so they'll kind of spike in flavor and be really flavorful and just fantastic. And then they'll kind of go to sleep. You can try the same barrel, a week apart, even a few days apart. If the weather's changed and say it's gotten hot or it's gotten colder, those barrels can kind of go to sleep, and it's just not a good time to try them. It's not a good time for a single barrel pick, and it's certainly not a good time to start harvesting, a bunch of barrels out of the warehouse to put together something like the Promethean you were just drinking. So if we try something in the warehouse and we're like, this is tasting good, let's pull it right now, like as soon as humanly possible, rather than, okay, well, we're going to mark these barrels to put together a blend and we'll pull them in a few weeks. No, you need to pull them right now. Things can change that fast. So that's another kind of one of the tricks of the trade, I guess, is staying on top of those barrels, kind of monitoring them on a barrel by barrel basis regularly as they mature, kind of course correcting them over time. And that's the French philosophy they call élevage, which means to elevate or to raise like you would raise a child. Every barrel kind of expresses a little bit differently, and we need to sometimes, course correct it. If it's getting a little out of hand, maybe a little spicy and a little aggressive, we need to calm it back down so it can kind of mature out and get some beautiful whiskey out at just the right time.
Mm-hmm. So one thing you said that I found a little interesting, you guys use 64, right?
63, yeah.
63, okay. But usually from my experience, a lot of people use like, I think it's like 32-gallon barrel, like the little mini smaller, like 1530s in like Southwest type climates. Do you think because you guys use that, it like has less of an aggressive like Southwest flair to it?
Yeah, that's so for us and the type of whiskey that we're interested in putting out. That's kind of a key component. I think is that we want to allow for more time for the whiskey to mature. Things like tannins, you want to get. If you use a small barrel in a really hot environment, you're going to get a bunch of wood extraction really quickly, and that can be kind of cool. But it's also going to bring a lot of dryness, a lot of spicy tannin, that kind of big, bold, aggressive style of whiskey. If you allow that to mature out a little bit longer over time, those tannins can kind of soften and resolve. Some of the funkier notes in there can actually turn to kind of fruity and perfumey and floral type flavors and aromas and things like that. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish. So the larger cask allows us to get that wood extraction that we're going to get in the heat and everything here in Texas. And it moves quickly still, but we're trying to buy a little bit of extra time, both by using the larger casks and those kind of warehouse maintenance, those maturation techniques that we use, is all in the interest of trying to get older and older whiskey that has more time to truly mature. I mean, we'd love to see, a 10-year-old whiskey come out of Texas, or especially something that's in a refill cask, something like a brandy or a single malt or something like that. And I think, we're getting pretty close on some of the product we have back there. There's some brandies and things back there that are getting up towards that age. So I think we're going to get there. It just takes a lot of hands-on expertise to make that happen.
Yeah, because usually I'm seeing like age statements coming out of Texas around 2, 3. I think the oldest I've seen that's on like a bottle is one of my Balcones single malt picks, and it's 4 years old, and that's the oldest I've seen. And I know single malt picks you don't need to have in like a brand new fresh oak barrel, so there's also some forgiveness in oak tannins there. So that's pretty impressive that you guys are trying to reach like a 10-year-old age statement, but still have a quality whiskey, not just to be like, hey, we released a 10-year-old whiskey, here you go. And it's like, oh, hello, wood.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, barrel tannins.
and you mentioned Balcones. I mean, those guys are doing some other interesting stuff. I mean, they have some even larger barrels. I forget what the size is, but they're enormous. That they've laid down a bunch of those too, and they're trying to age those out as long as possible. But if you go far back, you got to, of course, remember that the Texas distilling industry is, just a shade over 10 years old at this point, and in terms of whiskey anyway. And so there just hasn't been enough time. And if you go far back, say in Balcones history, they were using 5-gallon barrels for a lot of stuff, and there's still folks like Garrison Brothers I know uses an assortment of things from I think 15 and up to 53 and everything in between, because they want to pull some different stuff and have experiment with the maturation in their own way. So it's exciting to see those experiments start to really mature and inform what people are doing, with not just for us, but a bunch of different distilleries have really kind of figured out, okay, this works, but how can we make it work better and better and better, and refining it over time. And that I think is really kind of a coming of age moment in the whole industry, not just for us, but a bunch of other Texas distilleries as well.
Yeah. Speaking of you guys growing, I know I've missed a bunch of chats, so I don't know which one to highlight here. But a lot of people are talking about your guys' reach or your footprint. Any information on regards to like you guys growing, where your products will be available? Because I know right now you can buy them like online and pick up locally in the store, and they're kind of hit or miss here in Arizona. Are you guys starting to kind of expand into new territories, push your product out more?
So what we have to do first is expand the production, and that's absolutely underway. And there's more people on staff than there were a few years ago, and more barrels in the warehouse than there were a few years ago. We really don't want to sacrifice the quality or drop the age statements or anything like that. We want to continue to make it better and better and more mature. Just to rush more whiskey out quickly isn't really our goal, but we understand, we want to get more of it out there and into everybody's hands, of course. So part of that is the Saints Alley line is we're bringing in MGP, and we've looked at a few other things as well outside of MGP, and blending in some iron roots, and then doing sort of our maturation techniques and our cask finishing to that to get some of the iron root vibe out there, and in kind of a different format. So that's one way we're going about it. But best I can say is, a couple of years from now, you should see it becoming more available, just because we're making more and giving it time to mature. Outside of Texas, though, basically the only place you're going to find it is Total Wine, aside from a few occasional single barrels and independent bottlings, like Lost Lantern has done a few.
Oh yeah,
independent bottlings. A few like small releases like that have been outside of Total Wine, but for anything like Harbinger or anything like that, it's going to be Total Wine outside of the state of Texas.
Yeah, and I could be speaking for everyone in chat here, but I'm sure everyone who's like, hey, why can't I get this here? Hey, I can't wait to get this here. They'll be happy when they finally get it, and it's at that expected quality, versus like if you just send out some crappy version of it that you're like, okay, well, we need to expand, we need to grow. I'm sure that's the big move there. That's a smart move.
Yeah, we're absolutely quality first, and we're not going to sacrifice that to just crank out more whiskey more quickly. So only 2 years and good to go.
Yeah.
2 years can be a really good age statement in Texas, but I got to tell you, man, I'm really impressed with the stuff that's coming out. It's 4 or 5 year old. If it's done right and those casks are managed, it comes out fantastic.
Yeah, and in Arizona, in Total Wine, at least, we get the St. Sally products. We get usually the Harbinger, the 115, and then I think it's the 90 proof version.
Yep.
Here or there, like they'll pop up and they'll be off the shelves within a week, and then they'll come back like 6 months later. Yeah. Kind of like every other like beloved bottle that occasionally hits the shelves and everyone's like mine, and then runs away with them all.
Yeah, you can kind of think about what we do as almost like vintages of wine, right? We'll put together a batch and it goes out and then it disappears and then it's gone until the next batch gets put together. And so you'll see that on the back label, on most of those it's going to say 22A, 22B, and so you can see exactly which variety of Harbinger you got, or whatever other bottle you pick up. It's and it's kind of fun because when we do those separate distillations and the separate types of casks, and that gives us kind of a palette to draw from in that warehouse, right? So we're blending to a flavor profile, not just one set recipe being cranked out over and over and over again. So every release of Harbinger, for example, is going to be a little bit different than the last, but they will still all feel like Harbinger and have that same basic flavor profile. But you'll notice some slight differences between the A batch and the B batch from a certain year, for example.
Yeah, and I can definitely verify on that batching, because I was there 1 week, and Jonathan's like, "Hey, we're working on the next 115, so I need you to help me pull out 11 barrels that we're going to dump in." And we dumped them all in, and then we were trying them. And he's like, "So what do you think?" I said, it's good, but it's a little too brown sugar compared to what you normally have. It doesn't have kind of that oakiness on the back end. He's like, "Yep, I agree. I know exactly which barrel I'm going to pull for that one." And we went and dumped another barrel, and it's like, "Yep, that's the right profile."
Yeah, Jonathan's incredible like that. He's got a mind like a steel trap. I mean, this warehouse full of barrels, and I'll be out to dinner or something. I say, "Oh, I tried what was it? It was like one of the single malts that was I think it was a European oak barrel, and it was kind of towards." He's like, "Yeah, fourth one over, second one down, barrel 437. Yeah, I got it." Just pull it out and like, son of a bitch, yeah, it was.
Yeah. So when Josh was talking about earlier how they really go in and taste the barrels and stuff, they really do. And Jonathan knows his barrels like the back of his hand, and he could tell you almost to a note, what each barrel in that warehouse is like. And it can be both interesting and fun, because another time I was there, Marcia started the week off by saying, "By the way, just to prepare you, on Tuesday and Wednesday, we've got to taste through 50 barrels just to kind of see where they're at, see which ones might be single barrels, which ones need to be watered down." I'm like, okay. And so, you're working. So if you have to start drinking 50 barrels at 9 a.m., it's a job.
50. That's a lot of drinks at 9 a.m.
He
Yeah.
is not exaggerating. That is, and it's exhausting. I mean, after a while, I mean, first of all, you have to spit it out. I mean, there's no way you could make it through all of that by even taking tiny sips of each one. I mean, it just would defeat the purpose, right?
Especially at cask strength.
Yeah, and just imagine trying to smell foolproof, undiluted cask strength over and over and over again, and then try and analyze it and provide some valuable feedback on that. It's pretty difficult. I mean, you have to take breaks, and it sounds really fun, and it is, but it gets exhausting too.
Yeah. It'd be fun for like a day.
Yeah, you definitely can burn out your palate very quickly. So we had to do like 20 one day and 20 the next day. We ended up doing 10 the next, but it was one of those things where, you definitely want to spit it out. Otherwise, you're useless after you get through even the first 10.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you start noticing less and less, and that's where you get to a point where it's like you're not much help until your palate really gets used to stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need to take a break. And speaking of, I know that's I've yet to see or hear anyone speak of having knowledge that like personal that level of touch and care in their own product, where they know every single barrel, they constantly shift them, they're constantly trying them and watching them. I think it was Jack up in chat said earlier, like that's impressive, the amount of like time, energy, and effort you put in the product, and it for sure shows with the products I've tried. They're all fantastic. So it definitely shows the amount of care and love and attention you all put into it, and I just think that's insanely impressive.
Thank you so much. There's a great story of when they were first kind of researching and learning and spending time, and I want to say it was Cognac or somewhere in France, and they had this same awe at somebody, and these guys are dealing with casks that could be much older than anything like even in the United States, right? I mean, this is in Cognac and Armagnac, so they're dealing with an insane history of distilling brandies and things there. So they asked the gentleman who was managing the warehouse, they said, how do you know like where everything is and what it needs, and if it needs to, and he says, well, we try them. And he's like, well, you've got so many barrels here, how often do you try them? And he says, every barrel, every day.
That sounds fun, but I can only assume that it becomes here we go again. So before we started this whole live stream and I got an overwhelming amount of samples, I know you brought up the Harbinger tri-barrel, correct? Was that the one you brought up? So first of all, before you tell us all about it, because I know you kind of wanted to talk about your newest one. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But what's the second to newest one that we have? Is it the 54 months or the 40 months?
So
it is the 40 months.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, cool.
The only reason I know, Josh, is I brought down the first one, which is the old label, and this one's 54 months. I left the new label up there, and that's the 40 month. Gotcha.
So was that winter 2020?
No, that one is 21.1.
21.1. Okay.
Yeah, that's the newest one.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, or well, the newest one that we have. You guys released one. What is it? Was it June?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
There's the tri-barrel thing we've been doing for a little while now, and the gist of it is we do 2 releases a year, a summer solstice and a winter solstice edition of that, and that's you pick 3 exceptional barrels from the warehouse that are going to complement one another, with the summer going for a little bit of a lighter, sweeter flavor profile, to coincide with the weather at that time. Mm-hmm. And then the winter is going to be going for a dark, heavy, super rich flavor profile to go along with winter time. right? So they tend to be older like that. Whereas I think the age statement on Harbinger is like around 36 months or something like that is probably what you have. Whereas these would be 40, 54, getting into that older territory for Texas whiskey.
Yeah, I think I saw one that was like 58 or something on these samples. I could be wrong, but that's an insane age statement for Texas whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of these are kind of experimental and fun and whatnot, but still pretty awesome to see Texas whiskey at that old of an age statement.
Yeah. Some of them are experimental like that. Like I think the one you may be trying right now was the wheated. I'm not sure which one you poured, but
I think this one is the wheated.
Yeah, and so that was in keeping with the heirloom grain theme. Not just with corn, you can also find heirloom varieties of wheat. So that is an ancient type of wheat called farro that's in there, and to me, it gave a lot of almond kind of notes to it, if I remember it correctly. That one was fantastic. I mean, they've all been great, but that was one of my favorites. But it'll be interesting. You try that versus the winter tri-barrel, and you'll see what a difference that heirloom corn can make versus, say, including the heirloom wheat in there.
I like how soft it is for a Texas whiskey. That kind of, it's not super soft on the nose, but on the palate, it's very soft and fruity, but still brings in kind of that like Harbinger spiciness, and then the brown sugar as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, not insane notes. I don't have beautiful notes like you two have, but
hey man, sometimes I give goofy tasting notes. Like I'll tell Jonathan it's floral, but like purple flowers, and he's like, "Shut up! Don't start talking to me in colors, man."
It's like it's lavender. It's
Well,
that lavender floralness.
That's where it was funny. Like they talk about how you could have the exact same mash bill in two barrels that were bought at the same time, sitting right next to each other, and they have completely different flavor profiles. But I remember when we were going through all of those at one time, we all hit one where we're just like, oh my God, this is smoked pork butt.
Yeah.
First off, we didn't know how it got a smoky profile because it was Harbinger, but it literally tasted like somebody had been put a pork butt out on the smoker for hours, and it was just so unique and weird and interesting.
Yeah, we had one like that yesterday afternoon, man. I was.
You may have hit the same one.
It was literally, maybe it was, but I was like, "What in the world? This is straight up like specifically pork."
Yes.
On the barbecue pit, not beef, pork for sure. There was another one that I picked it up, and it was like, it's going to sound it's going to sound weird, but it was actually super delicious in sort of a sherry. It was almost like it had been in a sherry cask, even though it hadn't. You pick it up, and it was straight up strawberry yogurt, like Dannon fruit on the bottom, strawberry yogurt. Craziest thing, like not even subtle, just. You pick it up and you're like, oh my God, I'm just transported back to school lunch. What is going on here?
That might be my new favorite whiskey from y'all. I like that tri-barrel a lot. I'm not a wheated bourbon kind of fan, but it does taste it. I'm for sure this is wheated just because you said it. And I'm like, yeah, it does kind of have some wheated qualities. I just love the softness about it.
Yeah.
It just makes it so easy. At least right now, I would need to like side by side all of them. I mean, either which way, you're never going to lose drinking more of your guys, at least in a non-work related scene.
Exactly.
50 barrels in one day. Yeah, that seems like a loss, even with spitting out. Because I bet you still get kind of drunk still spitting.
Yeah, you have to really pace yourself for sure. But now that the wheat will bring that kind of softness and the nuttiness, and it makes it nice and round and almost a little waxy to me in that super pleasant way. So that was one of my favorites for sure. But you can contrast that to the other tri-barrel that's the winter solstice version, and you're gonna all of a sudden it's mahogany and leather and deep dark dried fruits and extra spice. Like French oak can bring a lot of those characters to it. versus an American oak cask. So yeah, dark chocolate, all of that kind of fantastic, deep, dark, wintry flavor quality comes out of the winter tri barrel versus, like you said, the summer's just kind of easier and lighter and more round.
Yeah,
it's not
and
as brooding.
It could be suggestion because the power of suggestion is real. But as I was sipping that and you were explaining all the notes you get off of it, I was like, oh, and there's the almonds. And I was like, oh, there's the waxiness. I was like, it's all there.
Yeah.
So I know so you guys have a few here that Patrick gave me that are, so I know this one's finished in port and peated, and I know the apotheosis. Yeah, you see, I ain't no good at this.
You can blame Jonathan for all this. These are all named after Greek and Roman mythological stuff. Icarus, flew too close to the sun. Promethean, esoteric. He just, even you talked about Harbinger 115 versus Harbinger XC. I never knew for the longest time why they named it XC until one day he goes, it's Roman numerals. XC means 90. It's 90 proof. And I'm like,
oh, yeah, I didn't even know that. I just called that 90 proof Harbinger.
Perfect sense.
We like our SAT words over at the distillery. So,
yeah. So I know you guys are doing a lot of experimenting stuff. So are you experimenting heavy with finishing stuff, or are you more so just trying to kind of backlog the products you already have into production? Because I know you guys kind of blew up after you won, what was it, Bourbon of the Year 2019?
Yeah, the world's
Bourbon of the World.
Yeah, world's best bourbon from the World Whiskey Awards that Whiskey Magazine does, which was fantastic.
Rightfully so.
Thank you. Finishing casks we're always really interested in, and we have single malt and finishing casks, bourbon that goes, like you have the apotheosis there. Which version do you have? Is it the Armagnac or?
Yep, Armagnac cask, 63.8%.
Cool. The short answer is, I guess, we're doing both. We're trying to put the core products out there as much as we possibly can, but still experimenting and doing some of the things that we just find interesting and we love. I mean, we're obviously a lot of French influence to what we're doing, and so we love French brandies like Armagnac, and love to put our whiskey in there and see what happens. And it tends to turn out pretty dang well, in my opinion. That's one of my favorite finishing casks that we use is the Armagnac casks. Is that what you've just poured there?
Yeah. Okay. New favorite whiskey. I feel like all these are going to be like new favorite whiskey. No, I've been on a huge finish kick recently, and I'm not good enough to know what finishes add what kind of flavors, just because I haven't done enough. A lot of the stuff that it's finishing, I've never actually tried or like deep dove. Like, sure. I know I like red wines and stuff, but most of my red wines are like crappy blended red wines, or like $20 red wine bottles. It's nothing fancy or anything like that. Sure. But I just love that it adds like an extra dimension to a whiskey that, is either just as good or like similar to a bunch of other products already out there.
Sure.
I mean, obviously you guys do a little bit of a different thing, so that's like not really so much for your brand as a whole, but like a lot of other Kentucky or, Texas distilleries, or just distilleries in general, I feel like, you have your core lines and whatnot, and those are fun, but then you finish in something else and it becomes something extra or different, and it's just an extra level of enjoyment for me.
Sure, absolutely. And one thing that's also kind of important for us when we're talking about cask finishing is sometimes cask finishing can take over a whiskey. Mm-hmm. And it, if something comes out tasting like, 120 proof port, then that's kind of a bummer for us. It's like, I would just take port and add vodka to it, I guess. Mm-hmm. Let's not go too heavy handed on the finish and try and cover up the spirit that's below. It's always best when it's done in balance and it's accenting The star of the show there in the apotheosis is going to be the Bloody Butcher corn bourbon. Okay, so that
I was thinking brown sugar note. It's
Absolutely.
a heavy brown sugar and then a very fruity, like dark red fruit flourishing.
You got
towards
it.
the
Yeah,
end there.
yeah. The Bloody Butcher corn to me always kind of reads like a spicy raspberry, like raspberry with baking spices kind of thing. And then you toss in the Gascon French oak, which is what they mature Armagnac in. That adds a little bit of extra tannin and spice and dryness, a little bit of extra dark fruit from that French oak cask. And then the Armagnac can bring that just slight kind of, French brandy quality to it. It can be a little bit nutty, especially if it's a little bit of an older cask. You get the fruitiness from the grape itself, depending on the varietal. So it can add a lot of that complexity, but it still tastes like bourbon, right? At least it tastes like Ironroot bourbon anyway.
Mhm.
So speaking on that same topic, Hanging AZ asks, do whiskey companies, and I'm just going to say blindly, do you think whiskey companies do this? And I'm assuming the answer for Ironroot is no, but correct me if I'm wrong. Companies use the funkier barrels to use for finished products, or I guess another statement would be, do you use your not so great whiskey or whiskey that didn't come out as you anticipated?
Sure, that's what I think the spirit of the question is. Am I trying? I think maybe another way of phrasing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, are you trying to cover up some sort of fault?
Yes, at least that's what I'm asking, or I'm assuming he's asking.
I think that absolutely does happen. That's not our approach. In fact, we tend to kind of celebrate the funky, weird casks and even give them names. There's a couple of casks in the warehouse that when we did an experiment, it was an accidental experiment because of some equipment issues. But when I think the fermentation went for 3 weeks, which is about 3 times longer than it should, on a batch a few years ago, and they said, well, let's put it in some barrels and see what's happening. And that thing comes across it reminds me of macaroni and cheese. It's like a charcuterie board. There's cured meats in there. It's weird, and it's bourbon, right? It's
a meaty bourbon.
Yeah, it's meaty. It's a little bit cheesy. It's funky. More than a little bit cheesy. And that's what happens when the fermentation goes too long. And we didn't say, hey, let's toss this in a sherry cask and see if we can drown that and make it go away. What we tend to do is when groups come in and they say, oh, we want to try something unique, we say, you want to try the Funkmaster Flex? We've got these 2 barrels over here. And people tend to love it. I mean, some people, it's just not their jam. I don't think we'll ever put that out as a product necessarily. Maybe as a single barrel, advertising it as, look, you're getting into some funky charcuterie board with this bourbon. But we don't shy away from those types of faults or try and bury them in finishing casks or take barrels that are lacking in some way. It's more of a trying to match what would pair well with this finishing cask. What is an Armagnac cask going to bring something to this barrel of whiskey? This particular bourbon, does it really like the Bloody Butcher corn mash bill, and really that combination comes out really well. That's really more what we're trying to do with these cask finishes. And so the apotheosis that you're trying, that's going to be a once a year. You have the Armagnac was the first one. We did a Pinot de Charente finish for another one, and then the most recent was a red wine cask finish as well.
Yeah, and I think I bought that red wine one, which I'm super excited for because I love red wine finished, and I think this is my new favorite one. I know I said that already, but I'm digging this one because, like you said, it's like a sweet and spicy raspberry almost. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best way because I could definitely tell there's the French oak, and then there's some sort of fruity finish going on in there. Again, I'm not the best with finishes. And then there's that brown sugar and that just general bourbon spiciness, that high rye bourbon spiciness going on. And I like it. I like it a lot.
No, you're dead on, man. That's exactly how I would describe it. when do we get an iron root rye? There is an iron root. Well, there are barrels of rye. There isn't an iron root rye product that's released yet, but it is coming. Closest thing you're going to get to that is it's getting released officially on Saturday. Is in the Saints Alley line. We're doing a rye that's got some iron root rye blended into it, as well as MGP rye, finished in a Tokai wine cask. Which, if you're not familiar with that, it's if you know, Sauterne is a French dessert wine. Tokai is a Hungarian dessert wine that has some kind of similarities a little bit. I mean, it's a different flavor profile for sure, but that's kind of the closest thing, is to compare it to as a Sauterne cask. So that thing came out fantastic. It's going to be called Saints Alley, the Nobleman. And that's going to be going out to Total Wine stores. It's a limited time, limited release thing, but keep an eye out for it because it is pretty fantastic. I'm pretty proud of how that guy came out.
Is that going to be a 95.5 rye in there as well?
I believe it was, yeah. And our rye, I think, was more like 60 or 70%. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it's a blend of that 95.5 plus, a little bit of ours as well.
Yeah, that's the one that will go online Friday at noon in Texas. But then available at the distillery Saturday. So they have some set aside for distillery only release and some set aside for online release. So that's the one if you have the fastest finger, Steven.
Yeah.
I'm off on, you said Friday?
Friday, noon Arizona or noon Texas, so that'd be 10 a.m. our time.
10. Yes, I'm off on Friday. I can make this happen. I'm gonna set a timer. I'm gonna make it happen.
And then it'll just magically show up in Arizona at some point.
Yeah, magically. Patrick just being Patrick. I mean, how else do you obtain a whole wall of iron root whiskey? Like that alone is impressive. I mean, Josh doesn't even have that.
No,
he works at the distillery.
no, it's he's got a way better backdrop than I do. That's I've got a printer. I mean, come on. I love that. Yeah, the Ardbeg fermentation. Give it a funky name and call it limited. That's, I don't know. We may have that happen. Put out that Funkmaster Flex as a single barrel. I could see some sort of like sticker along the bottom of it that's like Prince Purple Rain font, or maybe like Parliament Funkadelic font. Says Funkmaster Flex. But it's one of those, you got to tell people, listen, this is what you're getting into here. If you don't like it, don't buy this bottle.
Yeah. I would buy it. It sounds kind of like peated, when you describe it, you're like, it's smoky. It tastes like burnt stuff. Not a single soul is going to be like, I would love to drink that.
Yeah,
no, that's not a normal thing. But then you try it and it's like a love or hate thing, or at least from what I've noticed. Like people either hate it or they're like, wow, what is this? Yeah, peated absolutely. Whiskey? Okay, hello there. Ooh.
Yeah, and going back to the world's best bourbon, you actually have the batch as one of your samples.
Yes, this one.
2019B, and that's one of the things some people talk about. Those who win awards, they're just sending in single barrels. Robert and Jonathan actually originally weren't going to be entering anything, but then kind of last minute, so they literally just threw in their latest Harbinger batch and sent it over, and it won world's best bourbon. So that literally is the batch that won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've never been the biggest fan for those awards. I think those awards are just kind of a general like, hey, is this good? Is it not? Type thing. Because I see tags all over, especially not the World's Whiskey one, but the San Francisco Whiskey Awards.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Half of the bottles on like Total Wine's whiskey shelves have little tags on them that said that at some point they won this. But from what I can tell, because I think I even said that in my review of Harbinger, I was like, yep, they got that cool little taggy tag that says that they're good whiskey. I was like, we'll believe that. Let's give it a try. And I was blown away by it. So, I mean, again, well deserved in that one.
Thank you. I mean, I know awards can be, a divisive subject for sure. And I completely get it. I agree. I mean, it's such a subjective thing, and it's, there's all kinds of different awards out there, and they're run differently and all that kind of stuff. The way that I take it is that our bourbon went up against, some other really high quality stuff, and came out on top that day. And so that means, some people who know their whiskey thought that we did a pretty good job.
Especially for a Texas whiskey, that's impressive, because Texas has a theme or a general vibe throughout the whiskey that I think it's unavoidable. Or, well, maybe not even just Texas, but like Southwest aging. I mean, Patrick, I know you've talked a lot about Del Bach and all, but like they have like a more aggressive American single malt than most American single malts out there. And that's just because things age fast, like things heat up and cool down really quick in the desert, and that causes the whiskey to pull out and smash in and out of the barrel like it's rocking the boat. So like, things take some time, but I think it's well deserved, and it's impressive that beat out a lot of traditional whiskeys,
right?
Or bourbons. That in itself, I think, is beyond impressive.
Yeah, it's something we're pretty proud of, and we think we're doing a good job. So hopefully a few other folks agree, and it seems like they do. So that's always an honor to have somebody recognize what you're doing and kind of pick up on your vibe and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Speaking of, just tried hazmat whiskey for the first time ever. I mean, it is a hubris, so it's not the most aggressive whiskey out there, but it's floral.
So you're trying this guy right here.
Yeah, this one is 70.7%. It's extremely floral.
Yes.
Like the hubris I have, I think it's like 115 or 118, somewhere around there. It's not hazmat. It's more fruity than it is floral, but this one's extremely floral.
Yeah, that can happen a lot of times with so this is purple corn and then European oak.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, being a corn whiskey versus a bourbon, it's going to be a second use refill cask.
So the oak's not going to be as aggressive.
Yeah, you're pulling a lot of different notes from that barrel than you would as if it were brand new. So you'll get some of those kind of floral and fruity notes out of there, as well as from the purple corn as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't had this in a little while. I'm going to pour myself a little bit with you.
Yeah, I'll pour a little bit more. We could talk about it. Yeah, I thought hazmat was going to blow my mind away, but I mean, my brain cells are dying slowly, but outside of that, everything's good.
Yeah, it's a big boy, but you would think it would be drink more aggressively than this.
Yeah, I think my Jack Daniel's single barrel proof that's like 130 over there drinks way hotter than this. And I think those drink light for bourbon. That's that high of proof. By the way, thank you, Joe, for posting their link. If y'all want to check out Ironroot Republic Distillery, go click on that link, go there, especially if you live in Texas. You're only just a car ride away from checking out the distillery, maybe picking up some of their limited stuff, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Or come by and take the tour. Just sign up on the website and reserve a spot and come up and visit us. We always show everybody a great time, and you get to check out the warehouse and see the still and check out all the different heirloom corns and sample everything. So our tours are always a lot of fun. So yeah, appreciate that, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, and talking about the hazmat, obviously, Austin, both Josh and I were recently at a recent whiskey festival, and one of the talks of the whiskey festival that Ironroot brought with them was a hazmat tri-barrel.
Mm-hmm.
It drank really, really well, and it was impressive. So that, I believe, is coming out somewhere in the future. I don't know when, but that's another one that was like, wow, this, it drinks not near what you'd expect for 3 barrels that averaged above 140. It was amazing.
Yeah, I would think I was talking to Sarah and Chad from It's Bourbon Night, and they really enjoyed that one. And I said, guys, so what we had to do is we got these 3 barrels, and I think, two of them were up around like, say, 145, 146 or something like that. And we decided that was a little too aggressive, so we had to kind of water that down with something that was more around 143.
Yeah, 140 proof bourbon. That's 140 plus proof bourbon's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, where we located, Denison, Texas. That's right. So that's about an hour north of Dallas-Fort Worth. Of course, Dallas-Fort Worth is an enormous place, but depending on where you're coming from, it's about an hour north.
It's an hour north. So you're saying next time I'm doing some sort of trip with the military and I get stuck in Dallas-Fort Worth trying to go to like South Carolina, because that happens every freaking time I go there, I could just rent a car, go an hour north, and be there for the day.
Absolutely.
I would highly encourage it.
Good to know.
Highly encourage it.
Yeah, no, it's my goal to one day make it out to you guys. I haven't been to that many distilleries. I've only been to like local AZ ones. I think my favorite one was Del Bach as of yet, but for sure you guys are, out of all the distilleries I want to go see and whatnot, you guys are number 1 on the list. I just want to take like a tour through Texas, trying every single distillery and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get there.
We'd love to have you. Just let me know if you can make it out.
We'll do.
So what do you think about the hazmat? Still loving it as you get a few sips in?
I like it. I don't like it as much. If I had to rank them, it's probably although ironically, I was like the most excited to try this one tonight just because it's hazmat. It's probably the most lackluster compared to the tri-barrel blend and the Armagnac finished apotheosis. There we go. That being said, I still really like it. It's good. It's extremely floral though.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the biggest fan of floral whiskeys. I think honestly I might rather have the normal Hubris over the hazmat one just because it's a little bit more fruity.
Sure.
But I mean, again, fantastic. You can't go wrong. Like what? This bottle's like $60-$70.
Yeah, I think that it sold for maybe 70, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Like there's bottles that are like selling for like 120 that aren't even remotely as good as these. So that's my peace of mind. You can never go wrong.
Awesome.
Yeah. Hanging AZ. How are you going to have a dry night? We're live streaming. Go get some Ironroot. And if you haven't had Ironroot before, let me know. Yeah, Hanging AZ is another local AZ guy. I've been trying to get him to do like a sample swap for the longest time. Not a lot of whiskey to sample.
Yeah, I hear you've got somewhere around the neighborhood of like 142 Ironroot samples or something now. Is that?
Yeah. It's a lot. It was like this whole box and then a bag with it too. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I thought it was just going to be a few, but cool. But it gives me a lot of content and a lot of great whiskey to try.
Absolutely.
So no, you're not going to see me being upset about any of this.
Yeah. So you guys are both, I know there's a fantastic club out there that Patrick's part of and I'm in the Facebook group, but I've never had the opportunity to get out there and meet any of these guys, but you guys are both in the Arizona whiskey community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a really cool vibe to that club. It seems very sort of open-minded and interested in trying new things, and some whiskey clubs are maybe a little more traditional and like the old school stuff, and it's kind of cool to find a community like that where they're interested in folks like us and Del Bach and all the other craft distilleries that are trying some experimental, interesting things.
Yeah,
he likes everything that you don't.
Yeah, 4 Leaf Whiskey, Stacy. she's like a, just like I call, you know, Patrick the legend of like the Arizona whiskey community when it comes to Ironroot. She's kind of like the Irish legend of the whole whiskey tube community, or at least a smaller subsection. We're nowhere near as big as like the Whiskey Tribe, or you mentioned it's Bourbon Night previously. Like, we're nowhere near that size. But as far as like the smaller groups, Stacy, she just started her channel, and she's like the subject matter expert when it comes to Irish whiskey and like everyone's chats and whatnot. And I'm a known hater of Irish whiskey, just because I've never had any Irish whiskey that I'm insanely in love with. I've never had anything that blows my mind, that makes me be like, I'm 110% in Irish whiskey. I'm going to go out there and buy this. The only one I've had so far that I've purchased that I was like, okay, I'm for sure keeping this on the shelves and not trying to drink it all away is Green Spot. I like Green Spot. I've had a sample of Blue Spot. I really like that, but unfortunately that bottle is like insanely hard to get. Outside of that, that's pretty much like the Irish whiskey I've experienced.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. It sounds like she has some work to do.
Yeah.
I can help her with some of that, because I've definitely got some yellow spot, some red spot, and I've got the latest. Middleton does a series every year where it is aged specifically in trees from a certain forest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this year is supposed to be really, really good. So I have so far trees 2 through 7. I'm still trying to get tree 1. And I also got a couple other rare ones, and also like the Redbreast 27 year. So we could, although that one's definitely more the floral and peach and apricot. So if you like peach and apricot, you might like it. If you don't, maybe not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have a lot of samples we need to exchange.
Yeah, I always remember, actually, it was the first time I stayed up here overnight, and I crashed at Rob's house. We went to, and that's a good segue, actually. You have a sample of our Irish style. Oh, hey, what's up? Still looking at
Nashville.
Yeah, new St. Sally and Cali every day, along with some Harbinger 115. Yeah, it should be making its way out there soon. But Rob and I went to a bar in McKinney that's called the Celt. And McKinney's just basically North Dallas. And the Celt's an Irish style pub that's been a great Ironroot supporter and has carried our whiskey for a little while. And we tried one of those, the Bluebell Forest, I think it was. I was like, man, I've heard a single barrel whiskey, but this Irish is a single tree. Holy crap. But that's a great segue. If you want to try our Irish style whiskey, I believe you have a sample of the Celt that we did in kind of partnership with those guys. They wanted to create, their own, Green Spot, Redbreast, that single pot still Irish style, but they wanted us to create a whiskey in that, inspired by those. So that's what you have there. If you pour a sample of the Celt, it should remind you a little bit of Green Spot and Redbreast and things of that nature.
You know what it reminds me of on the nose? You know that, like, I don't know what it's called, so I'm going to describe it. So bear with me on this one.
Yeah.
But it's like it's a dessert where you basically layer, it's like Nilla wafers, pudding, and then bananas, and then Nilla wafers, pudding, bananas.
Yeah.
So it reminds me so much of that on the nose, because I get like a nice, like, Nilla wafery vanilla custard, and then like a banana.
Yeah, shortbread, banana, vanilla cream, vanilla custard. Absolutely. Yeah, you're dead on. And that's, making it in an Irish style, half malted barley, half unmalted barley, in that Irish pot still style, and then aged in our second use bourbon casks.
Yeah, and there's also some like oak and like a little bit of like almost like a smokiness, but not like peaty smoke, a little like tinge of like smokiness.
Sure.
Yeah, it was interesting because they released the same, but just at 2 different proof levels. So that's why you actually have 2 samples of it. One at the initial release, which was a lower proof level, and then a second one they did later, which was at a higher proof level. So
Oh, you got both. Nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I gave them both. So this is the one that's at the higher proof level. So it's interesting comparing the two next to each other and seeing what the difference just a little bit more water made to it.
Yeah, and also remind me next time we do a sample swap, speaking of story time, so they're like kind of like this like NDP that they haven't yet made their NDP. I'm gonna live stream with them probably next week, so
Cool.
I'll deep dive that stuff with them. But they do. I'm part of this authors guild where they do kind of like single barrel releases, store picks essentially here or there. And they did a release of their 2 MGP barrels. They're called the twin barrels. So they're 2, I think are 5 or 6 year old MGP single barrels at cask strength that were filled in the exact same date, the exact same warehouse, never rotated, sat side by side, and they're 2 wildly different bottles. And so remind me, I'll give you a sample of those 2. That way you can kind of like tear that apart too, because that's a fun one. I haven't done it yet because I'm waiting on a live stream to do it, but it's fantastic. Also, guys, check out Storytime. They're fantastic, as well as Ironroot. Links are somewhere in chat. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always fun to see kind of a sister barrel situation, right? Where it's filled the same day, same mash bill, same run off the still, same wood type, same cask, should come out pretty much the same, and they can just be wildly different. And that's one of the beautiful things about whiskey is there's always something new and always something different, and you never really encounter this exact same thing twice.
Yeah, I like this. It's unlike a lot of your guys' other stuff.
Yep.
But I can see how it's kind of like it's a Texas inspired, or it's an Irish inspired Texas whiskey, or the other way around, however you want to look at it.
Right.
Because it's like an Irish whiskey, but if it had some American grassroots in it.
Yeah, exactly.
Some Texas. And that's another reason why I have yet to like delve heavily into Irish whiskeys, because I feel like a lot of the Irish whiskeys like simple, it's very vanilla, or at least a lot of the cheaper stuff, which is honestly, if I haven't like beloved to a product, I'm not going to go straight out and buy like an $80-$90 bottle of yours. That's just me personally. So I haven't like delved heavily into it, but this reminds me of like kind of what a lot of Irish whiskey, at least in that like $40 or $50 price range, is missing. It's that like extra little bit of like oomph to it. Yeah,
and the the maturation here, and then combined with a little bit higher proof and stuff like that, is really going to bring that extra kind of viscosity to it, right? Extra flavor intensity, kind of concentrated a little bit more than something that's kind of a consumption. A worldwide Irish whiskey is going to be one thing, but you buy something like a Redbreast 12, 15, older, some of those more expensive bottles can be a whole different animal. And it's kind of going in that direction.
Yeah. So with this specific release, is this an ongoing release?
It is. There will be more coming out. At first, it was kind of an experiment, but it came out pretty dang well. So and people really loved it. So there's another release of it coming. I think maybe later this year. We don't have much time left, but I think there's going to be another release of it. Still pretty small because we didn't. Our main thing is corn and releasing bourbon and stuff like that. But we're continuing to make it, and if it keeps being popular, then we'll make some more, I'm sure.
Yeah, and on that note, I know a lot of your guys' whiskey it's like grain sourced locally. What was the mash bill of this? I don't know if you said this already, but what's the mash bill of it? And was this sourced from around your guys' area, or was it from like Ireland or?
If I remember correctly with this one, so we have distilled. Let me answer. Firstly, it's 100% barley, but partially malted, partially unmalted, right? I believe on this one it was actually 50-50, if I remember correctly. We have distilled Texas grown malts, but the barley, but there's not a whole lot of it. Barley doesn't grow that well here in Texas. There is some, and we've distilled some of that, and we've got some in sherry casks that came from Scotland, and a few other types of barrels. But we had a guy that actually ran a coffee truck in the parking lot of Ironroot years ago. His name is Matt Drew, and Matt Drew got into not only making coffee, but then started to get interested in roasting coffee, and kind of doing his own thing from bean to cup, if you will, rather than grain to glass. But Jonathan, our head distiller and one of the owners, was talking to him one day. He said, man, making malt's an awful lot like roasting coffee. Maybe you'd be interested since you like the coffee thing. And well, he decided he would go on and do that. And so he went to school and trained and got some distilling industry experience in becoming a maltster, and was making malts up in Montana, and reached out and said, yeah, I'm making malt just like you suggested now. And they talked about, what sort of profile he was going to want. And so we've distilled, a lot of that Montana malt that came from Matt at the time. So he had a podcast for a little while also called Single Malt Matters. That was pretty cool. He interviewed a bunch of distillery folks, and so that's where kind of when we're distilling barley, that's where we like to get it from.
Okay, so but it's still like grain coming from the United States. It's not coming from like Ireland or anywhere else like that.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I know some places they'll source. So I know like ASW, I believe they source their grain and then they distill it from, I think it's Scotland. Yeah. They have the Tire Fire whiskey.
Right.
I could be wrong. I could completely be speaking out of turn, but.
And that's very common too. A lot of folks, they get malt from Scotland or even Ireland. And so, but we kind of had that connection to the American malting industry and decided to use it, and it came out pretty dang good. So any of our other bottles like Icarus, Promethean, Hubris, and Esoteric be available for shipping anytime soon? Unfortunately, we cannot ship. There's some creative ways that folks are figuring out how to ship things and stuff like that. It's not something that we can currently do. We certainly can't ship directly from the distillery. Just order on the website and we ship it to you is not something we can do legally, unfortunately. Love for that to change, but that's the case right now.
Is that a city-related issue?
No,
or is it Texas?
It's Texas.
Totally Texas.
Okay, because I know that's the same way. I think it's with Colorado because there's some craft like you guys. I would say you guys are what, like kind of craft, but kind of not really, because you're not like super small, but you're still kind of craftish. So you're kind of limited to your state. There's some Colorado distilleries like that where I'm like, I wish I could just buy it online, pay for the shipping, and it would just come to my house or somewhere like that. But it just unfortunately they don't let it happen.
Tell me about it. I'd love to get my hands on more bottles of Talnua from out there. That's speaking of American Irish style. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And when you say kind of craft, I mean Ironroot, after they're now been around for 8 years technically. I mean, Icor came out for their 5th year, which is before COVID. So I think they're like 8-9 years old now. Yep. They just filled their 1,000th barrel this year.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah, so
that's a huge landmark.
You may think they're big, but they are not very big at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, think about the number of people. I mean, I've just moved up here and kind of joining the team, more full time. And other than that, you've got Robert, Jonathan, Marcia, John, and Alex and Ashley, and that's it. That's the entirety of Ironroot right there.
Okay. Oh, so you guys only have like 10 people on the payroll, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And a bunch of people who volunteer.
Yep. Yeah. We have some amazing folks that come and help us fill bottles on a regular basis and stuff like that. So it's community is hugely important to us. Like anybody that comes to the distillery just to visit and do a tour, or there's awesome hardworking volunteers and people that shout us out on social media or bring us on YouTube live streams. I mean, we're always humbled by the amazing kind of family experience of Ironroot supporters, and it continues to play like a huge role in making a small distillery from super far north Texas kind of a well-known successful thing. So we appreciate everybody that's been supporting us any way that they can. And I know that the chats have been going crazy the whole time about where can I get it, when can I get it, how can I get it, and we're doing everything we can to get more and more whiskey out there. So
yeah, the only reason I'm fortunate enough to have the one, so the original bottle I reviewed was donated, so I didn't even buy it. It was donated to the channel from one of our viewers, which again, super fortunate for. Thank you. And then the rest, again, thank you to Patrick, has been because he procures them for me because he's a fantastic dude. So it's just fortunate.
So you wanted to maybe try one more here?
Yes.
And if you were to try one more, I would suggest, this is what I always like to end folks with on a tasting, is our Icarus.
Icarus. Let's see. I have that somewhere.
It's in there.
Icarus. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. So this was another one I was excited to try just because. So this is the finished in port and peated barrels.
That's right. So like Patrick was saying earlier, when he was saying that was his favorite Ironroot expression. It's the same thing as Hubris. It starts the same way, that purple corn and European oak, second fill, second use barrels, and then partially transferred into a port wine cask, and then partially into peated quarter casks from Islay in Scotland.
Okay, so when you do that, do you separate the barrel and you put them into two different barrels, or do you kind of finish it in port and then finish it in the peated barrels?
Finished separately and then blended back together, so we get the proportions right of the way we want the flavor profile to come together. So it's going to have that kind of corn sweetness, even some of that floral that you were talking about up front, and then it kind of transitions on the mid palate to that juicy port wine, that the grapey notes from that, almost a sort of grape jelly. And the peat to me really just comes in on the finish. It's kind of like a puff of earthy smoke there at the end. So that when Icarus is really blended right, it's a delicate balance of those three things. And it's really cool to try like just the peated cask, for example, is pretty fun, and it's way more intense on the peat, of course. But we like to have that balance and that sort of transition, so that it feels like a journey and experience of a whiskey. And to me, it's like it's one that I can definitely point to, and I love Icarus as well. It's like nothing else I've ever had. I can't think of a single whiskey that's quite like Icarus is.
I know I said I would stop doing this, but I would have to A/B them. But this with I'm just going to say Armagnac finish because I know how to pronounce Armagnac properly. But it's interesting. Like you said, it's like a sweet grape jelly, and then there's a little bit of like a smoky, meaty characteristic hidden behind that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I love that because I tried to do some. There was a long time ago. I don't know if you watch our channel. You probably don't very often, but I usually have.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. But so I used to have all the time my friend Alec, as well as like I usually have him on live stream. He's just super busy this month, so he's probably not going to be here for a while. But usually we've been like working together, and we used to do this when he lived up here, because now he lives in Tucson, like 5 minutes away from Del Bach, which is actually fantastic. But when he used to live up here, we used to do this series where we would pick bottles and we would blend them together, and we would call it the blend off. Mm-hmm. And it was basically like a competition to see who was the better blender of whiskey, like who could take 2 bottles of whiskey and make a better blend. Never went well. But from one thing I've learned from doing that and messing around with things and trying to fix like whiskey I didn't like with whiskey I liked, it's never ended well, in my opinion. But what I learned from that is peat is the most difficult like subsection of whiskey to work with. You put a little bit of peat, you're like, it's not smoky enough. You put a little bit in, and then it's like it's only smoke.
Yeah. No, it's
so difficult to work with.
it absolutely correct. Blending is really interesting, and I'm learning more about it all the time. I mean, I've been really fortunate, even just yesterday, spending time, picking apart whiskeys and getting to learn from Jonathan and all of his experience. And then Chris Trevino, Liquor Hound as well, was hanging out there yesterday and just listening to those guys and hearing them describe stuff and put tasting notes together and picking out things that maybe I didn't notice before, but now they're like drawing my attention to it. And the interesting thing about blending these is that it's not a 2 + 2 = 4 situation ever. It's like 2 + 2 might equal 9, or it might equal -5. Like when you're blending whiskey together, it's not a linear relationship. Like, if I just add this and add this and add this, I'll get those in perfect proportions and they'll complement each other. It's just not the way it works. Like we tried yesterday, there was one of these barrels of bourbon that came off. It wasn't the strawberry yogurt one, but it was one that was kind of similar. It tasted like it was maybe partially PX sherry and partially Oloroso sherry, even though it had no sherry to it. That was just how juicy this bourbon came out. And Chris goes, "Man, you throw this in a peated cask for a little bit. I'm going to tell you what, that'd be pretty dang good." And I was like, "Well, why don't I just, rinse a glass with some Lagavulin 16 here real quick, dump it back in the bottle so I get just the tiniest little bit of peat in this glass, and then we'll pour the bourbon on top of it and see how it comes out." And it was just like, oh my God, that's all peat. Like just rinsing the glass with it, right?
Yeah, I had an Irish whiskey that I didn't care for. It was a Bushmills, what was it? The Peaky Blinders edition. I bought it because I'm a sucker for that show. Again, like I've said previously, I'm not the biggest fan of Irish whiskey, but I was like, well, it's like a 92 proof Irish whiskey for like $30. I was like, whatever. It's worth the risk. And I love the show. Didn't really care for the whiskey in and itself. We did like a little short review. So I was like, okay, well, what if I had like a little bit of peated whiskey into it to kind of make it a little bit more interesting, and then I'll drink it and enjoy it. Added a little bit. I was like, okay, well, it's still like, I was like, it didn't get enough peat. And then I added like the same amount, thinking that it would just get a little bit more aggressive. And the peat just took over, and it was like a peated island. I was like, what the heck?
Right.
Not that I was complaining, because it still made the whiskey better than it originally was, but it just, I was like, okay, wow. Hello, Pete.
Yep.
There we go.
I used to do a little, I guess, kind of trick like that. Have you had Brimstone from Balcones?
Yes, I am conflicted. I had a sample that I think might have went bad, but
maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. So I feel like it went bad because it reminded me of burning plastic and other stuff. Like it just. Again, I don't like talking crap on distilleries. Like even like the Balcones releases, I don't like, or I didn't love. It's not that I'm like, these are bad whiskeys. I was like, these just aren't the whiskeys for me. But that was the only whiskey I've ever had where I was like, this, I don't know a single soul that might actually enjoy this.
Yeah. It's a very once in a while thing, but Brimstone to me is actually kind of fun. But I've done that same thing with like kind of a middle of the road Irish whiskey, and then like 2 drops of Brimstone in it, and it just transformed the thing.
So what are the notes you get off of Brimstone? I know obviously you know them, so like you might not want to get too into it. So if you don't, just let me know. But like,
sure.
What are your personal thoughts on that?
It's obviously a super intense, very weird, unique whiskey. Um, and my understanding is there's some process where they smoke the liquid itself. It's not smoked grains.
Mhm.
So you get this kind of, to me, it makes me think barbecue pit. There's definitely kind of a rubberiness to it as well. Um, I will say the brimstone I've had that's been more recent batches, and I'm not sure if they're even still making it now because it's always been a really divisive thing for them. But the more recent batches just feel more refined and better to me, even though they're still super intense and incredibly smoky and have that kind of rubbery barbecue pit kind of vibe to them. But yeah, I mean it's so intensely smoky that it's hard to get much else other than that. I think if you know what blue corn tastes like in whiskey and you're well familiar with that, I think that comes across through it as well because it is blue corn base. Uh,
Mhm.
it has that kind of earthy nuttiness that blue corn can have. But yeah, I mean it's a very once in a while. Okay, sure, hell, somebody brought out a bottle of brimstone. Why not? Let's do it.
And I can agree because that's kind of how I am with the like Lefroy. Dear Lord, my dogs are going hard in the paint right now. Lefroy 10 cash strength. That's one of those ones where I think Lefroy's a little bit too like aggressive, ashy peatiness for my flavor profile. I don't
Sure.
love it per se, but every once in a while when I'm like, hey, I want the most aggressive peat possible, it hits the spot. So I
Yep.
guess I just might not have tried that on the time I should have, because the only time I've ever had the sample was that one live stream I did a long ways back when I first decided to get into Texas whiskey. And I was like, oh, no, nope, nope. It's like burning plastic and other things like that. I was
Yep.
like, this compared to that, like Harbinger. And I think I had one of the releases of St. Alley, as well as some of the other Balcones releases and whatnot. And I was like, comparatively, like this is over here while the rest are like all like within this range. And I was like, right now I'm living here, so this out here, I'm like, this is a no-go.
Yeah, it's wild and weird, but like at the same time, Balcones has put out some of my favorite Texas whiskeys that I've ever had. Uh, Emma is one of the blenders over there and a good friend of ours, and she's not only an amazing, fantastic human being, but has a fantastic palate as well. And she picked this barrel. Um, what was it? It was single malt. It was like the next run after a run of peated single malt, so there was still like some peat left in the still. And then they aged it in a port cask, or maybe it was finished in a port cask. And holy crap, that was like eating grape Jolly Ranchers next to a campfire. Super delicious, fantastic. Like that's been one of my favorite Texas whiskeys that's come out in the last year, probably, from those guys.
Yeah, I feel like I need to deep dive some of their more expensive stuff, because the stuff that I've tried is their like lower like $40 range stuff, like the blue corn. Their bourbon I didn't really enjoy, but I loved the back there the lineage, the
Oh yeah,
single
lineage
malt,
is
and
great.
then their single malt's 110% in, but all their other stuff I feel like I might need to look a little bit more into.
Yeah, and it's a lot like us, Balcones or any other, Texas distillery that's doing interesting creative stuff. Usually those more limited edition things are going to be distillery, tasting room only bottles and stuff like that. So, still hard to get, although they have a lot of reach these days, which is awesome. So,
Yeah, they've grown pretty crazy. Also, I would like to report, think I'm with you guys. Icarus is my favorite. It just has that like that little like smoke in the back end towards
Yeah.
the back half of the palate, and the finish, that little bit of smokiness that just comes in and grows a little bit and then leads like with a nice smokiness. It is so good. It takes a finished whiskey, because I think I like the Armagnac finished one, because and I know the name of it, I'm just not going to pronounce it because I know I'm going to butcher it. The Armagnac finish one, it brings a nice fruitiness to the Harbinger.
Yeah.
And then, correct, it's Harbinger?
So it's effectively a portion of what goes into Harbinger. So that's going to be the Bloody Butcher corn based. When you take Harbinger 115, for example, it's going to have some purple corn and some other things put into it. So
okay.
It's going to have a Harbinger vibe though, for sure. But then it's finished in the Armagnac cask.
Okay, yeah, because it was like a fruitier version of that essentially to me, and then this one, it's kind of like that, but a little bit more red wine, dessert wine, like the port finish. Usually gets a lot more of like plums or red fruits, and a lot more like sweetness to me. So it was a little bit sweeter of a finish, and then it also had this little like zinger towards the end that was just like this nice like earthy smoke.
Yeah.
That might honestly be one of the more interesting whiskeys I've tried this year, just because it evolves. Like the first half, there's borderline no smoke, and then the second half, it's mostly smoke.
Yep.
Like I don't know how you get that, but it's exciting. It's different.
Maturing in the separate finishing cask, and then blending that back together to get just enough peat. Right, is kind of how we get that, rather than just pulling it straight out of the peat cask and putting it in port or vice versa. It's the separate maturation to create these intense flavors that then you can balance at the end when you go to put together something for a release.
Yeah, and it's extremely balanced. Like this is the most, I would say, balanced peated whiskey I've ever had, where the smoke hasn't completely taken over, where it's more of an accent, and you let the kind of the wine finished. It's a corn whiskey, correct?
Corn whiskey, exactly.
Yeah. So he's essentially kind of like the hubris, and then I know it's probably not the same mash bill exactly as hubris, but kind of like hubris, and then you wine finish it, and then you kind of like let it evolve with a little bit of extra smoke. And I don't know how to put words to it because I'm not half as elegant as both of you guys, but it's exciting. Patrick, thank you for the samples. Thank you. Like seriously, this I need to get a bottle of this stuff.
Patrick's game is on point.
I'm sure we could work on helping you with that one. Okay. And there's still a few other iron roots that you haven't tried that haven't given you samples of. So, like I've got both the Lost Lanterns, both just the straight bourbon whiskey, and then there's the Lost Lantern Texas straight corn whiskey.
You want to talk about floral corn whiskey?
Oh, no kidding.
That one. And I just got to meet those guys, Adam and Nora, in Austin for the first time, and so that was really cool. And they brought a bunch of really interesting independent bottling. So some of it's finished in a Chardonnay cask that was really fun. I forget what that was, but they are picking all sorts of interesting stuff. And how cool is it to do that Scottish independent bottling, that sort of style, and there's other folks like Barrel does some things like this, but they I think are really taking that Scottish style independent bottling and applying it to American craft whiskey, which is an awesome thing. So,
and Steven, that's a whole other area because I have every single release of Lost Lantern has done so far sitting up over there. I love what they've done, and I actually, and I met Adam and Nora, but I talked to them before, and they even commented how it was me and their father were the only ones to buy the complete set of their very first release. So, yeah, when Nora said that, I was like, I just like your stuff.
I've tried a few their vatted single malt, and then because I've had samples of their vatted single malt, then I think it was an Iowa based single malt
Cedar
distillery.
Ridge.
Yeah, Cedar Ridge. I tried that. Like they're expensive, so I have yet to buy one of their bottles. But from what I've had, they can pick some great single barrels. And I love, like, because you brought up barrel. Barrel does something kind of else where they do a lot of blending, and I think that's fun and exciting, them doing blending, because I think that's an amazing art form. But it's also an amazing art form to just have a fantastic palette and be like, that's the barrel we want a single barrel. That's the barrel we want a single. And they're kind of creating a, how would you call it? Kind of like the store pick model, but a store pick model that you can get anywhere in the country. Like, you don't have to be next to this random store somewhere else, because I don't know, store picks, it's hard to talk to your friend that's in maybe New York. You're like, hey dude, have you had this store pick? They're like, of course he hasn't. He's nowhere near that store. So it's nice that they're kind of creating the independent bottler, what I guess the closest equivalent in American whiskey that people are commonly known of is like a store pick model that can be anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's fun because they're featuring mostly smaller craft distilleries.
Mm-hmm.
So they're able to source stuff, and you're able to get it. That good luck in getting it any other way. So like they've done Frey Ranch, which unless you're in Nevada and Southern California, you can't get it.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're doing some cool stuff.
Oh yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah. They just recently did a one out of New York I'd never heard of before, but I got to try it down in Texas when they were there, and it was like, oh my God, this is so good. I need this bottle. And it's now sitting on my shelf. It just got here 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Special delivery.
And I know they've done a lot of, like, for example, Del Bach, which I know we're fortunate enough to be super close to that within 2-3 hours. You it's probably more like 3 hours. For me, it's more like 2 hours. You live insanely far away from me. Ironically, you live like an hour away, even though we're still both in the Phoenix metropolitan area. With traffic, it's like an hour and a half. Don't ask me how I know. But we're fortunate to love enough to live so close to like such a small, amazing craft distillery that not a lot of people are. Just like a lot of people around you, you guys, Josh, are fortunate to love enough to like live that close to Ironroot, but not a lot of people can do that. And so I think it's cool that they're kind of highlighting, be like, hey, this is a taste of what Ironroot can do. Hey, this is a taste of what Del Bach can do, and other smaller craft things that just a lot of people wouldn't be able to try had they not lived super close or went extremely out of their way to be able to try it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I see a comment in there, so I sort of get intimidated by craft distilleries, don't want to clunker, don't want to miss out. And I completely understand that. I mean, there's all sorts of different whiskeys that you want to try out there, but to buy a bottle from X distillery in some states and get it shipped to you somehow is going to be a bit of a shot in the dark at times. And unless you've been there before and had it, and that's great if it's your local distilleries within your state or whatever that you can easily have access to, and obviously encourage everybody to go and visit and support their local distilleries. But if you want to try Ironroots or Frey Ranch or Bacones or whatever else, one of the benefits of somebody like Lost Lantern is at least that somebody who has a vested interest and a lot of expertise in selecting these whiskeys, and they know them inside and out. They've tried whiskey from all over the country in all different styles, so they really know their stuff. You're more than likely going to be trying at least one of the best examples of that distillery that you can get. So if you try something from, say, Lost Lantern, and you enjoy that, chances are high that you'll enjoy a lot of their other picks too, even if it's from a distillery you haven't had before.
Yeah.
And also they both have amazing experience where he used to write for a major whiskey publication, and she used to work at a major New York liquor store, independent liquor store. So they both have great experience in this realm. And they came together and decided to create this company and start traveling around the U.S. and trying all kinds of whiskey and sourcing it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's really, a big part of what you're getting with folks like that is they're trying to lend their expertise to expose people to craft whiskey they wouldn't have a chance to otherwise try.
Yeah, and some of it's quite interesting because I actually have one that they released that was, I don't know if it was aged or finished in a slow gin barrel. I have never seen anybody do that before.
That's right.
Slow gin is like a fruity gin, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I know whiskey, and that's about it. I don't know pour. I don't know, that's not my expertise. I drink a lot of whiskey, and that's about it.
We'll talk, Steven. You'll get to try it and see for yourself what you think.
Patrick's got a couple things.
Patrick is what I would consider, or what the kids would consider, the plug.
The goat. Patrick the whiskey plug.
Yeah, the mule. A bunch of nicknames. So Hanging AZ says, I got sort of intimidated by craft distilleries, don't want to clunker, but don't want to miss out. Can either of you guys shed a little bit light on how you guys approach that, or how, as a brand ambassador of Ironroot, how you would approach someone being like, hey, I'm not sure if I should, because obviously I'm fully in, I'm sold, I've drank the Kool-Aid, I'm all in. Any release you release that you're like, hey, you can buy this, I'm like, take my money, please. So how would you kind of essentially approach someone who's unsure about buying your products, and so why should someone buy the newest release of, I know recently it's been the tri-barrel blend, right. So kind of how would you approach something like that?
Well, the first thing is you got to think about we're a Texas whiskey, obviously, so that's going to come with a certain kind of character, a certain kind of flavor profile, even though there's huge amount of variety within the state. So if you've tried other Texas whiskeys from somewhere else and enjoyed something there, then okay, we're over that first hurdle. You're interested in what's going on down here. The next thing is going to be that pot still spirits are going to be very, very different than column stilled spirits, right? So if you're coming to Ironroot with an expectation that it's going to taste like a traditional Kentucky style bourbon, or anything from Buffalo Trace, Wild Turkey, MGP, any of these more common, well-known distilleries that are making bourbon, and you try Ironroot with that in mind, well, you're going to be very surprised, because it's going to be a very, very different experience. It's going to be a lot more grain forward, a lot more viscosity to it, stuff like that. So keeping that in mind, if you're okay with pot stilled spirits and you're okay with Texas, then I would say that you're probably going to have a good time if you try something from us. But it's all about expectation. If you have an open mind to trying different things, then I think you'll enjoy it. The best way to give it a try, of course, is to come visit, take the tour, have some samples. I know it's not out there in stores to be able to try it very easily. And even if you see it at a Total Wine near you, it's probably going to disappear pretty quickly. But those are going to be the main things to expect, in my opinion. The pot still and the Texas maturation. So if you're okay with those two things, then I would say you're going to enjoy what we have to offer.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of connects well with one of your recent videos, Steven, where you did those 5 bourbons that you absolutely get every single time. And one of the ones you talked about was Still Austin. And Still Austin and Ironroot both do where they add water in the barrel. The biggest difference between the two is Ironroot being pot stilled.
Yep.
Still Austin is column stilled. They have a 40-foot tall column still named Nancy.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's where when you talked about how it also was very much kind of like what you've tasted in some Kentucky whiskeys. It's because most Kentucky whiskeys are done in a column still.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's going to lead me into my question, ironically, that I was going to ask Josh. So me not knowing any of this stuff, because I kind of fly by the seat of my pants with all this stuff. I get in front of a camera, I talk about whiskey, and I kind of see where the comments go. And I'm like, okay, well, I should not have released that video, but I just kind of let it go. You know, I live my life. I am who I am, and I enjoy my life, and I love drinking whiskey. So I don't know anything about in regards to the difference between pot still and column still outside of like the things that have like the whiskeys I've tried where they've put out like, hey, this isn't a pot still. Usually I realize that pot still is a little bit more oily or viscous. Outside of that, I know nothing about the difference. But that is true. Like Still Austin is another Texas distillery that I enjoy. Not as much as Ironroot, honestly, but that's not me just trying to like please you guys because I'm talking to you. But like I like.
I've got, there it is. Still Austin back down. Dang, going backwards.
Please.
Yeah, I got
those guys are
somewhere.
great.
Yeah.
And one of the nicest guys I've ever met in the really ever met in life, but in the Texas whiskey industry is Chris Seals, is one of the owners of Still Austin, is a fantastic gentleman, and just could not ask for a nicer guy, and they make fantastic whiskey. It's just in a very different style, even though there's some similarities in the types of grains that we use at times. They use some heirloom corn varieties and stuff as well. Not quite in the same way that we kind of go all in on that, but they do a lot of interesting stuff with their mash bills. And they do, as Patrick said, they do the adding water and cask and stuff. But one of the biggest differences between us and them is going to be the use of a column still versus a pot still.
And so what does that do? Because I've always like thought of you guys, if you guys are more Texas forward, you're more kind of, I feel like you guys are more, your flavor profiles are more Texas. I'm gonna say funky. I guess Texas is a little weird when you compare it to Kentucky bourbon, but I don't think it's funky. But I always refer to the flavor profile as Texas funk. Yeah. And they're a little bit more down the streamline of kind of like that Kentucky. I always say they remind me of if you blended Texas like bourbon, like a Texas funk bourbon mixed with like a Kentucky straight bourbon, you blended them together. That's what their products remind me of. Yeah. So kind of, if you would highlight, so obviously we know the difference is they use a column still and you guys use a pot still. So what would the difference with those two different stills kind of change?
Sure. So, there's always been this story told for a long time now about Texas whiskey, that it was all about the heat. Right? It's all about the climate, and it's all because it's hot here, and, small barrels at times, and, depending on the distillery and all this, but it's Texas because it's hot. And well, that's true. And that has a lot to do with the climate, has a lot to do with things here. That's not the whole story, and it was always kind of told as an incomplete story, in my opinion. And it's the fact that a large majority of the craft distilleries in Texas, well, a lot of craft distilleries do this anyway, but in Texas specifically, use a pot still, and that will bring, like you mentioned, a viscosity and kind of an oiliness. A pot still retains those much more than a column still does, just in its nature and the way that it works. It's a batch process where you fill the still, you run the still, you clean the still, you run it again, right? And the way that a pot still works, anything that makes it all the way to the top of this still and over what we call the line arm, and ours has a pretty aggressive downward angle, so anything that makes it up over the top as it's evaporating and distilling is going to make it all the way down into the whiskey, right? So that's why ours has a lot of that kind of heavy, weighty, viscous. A lot of those oils that are present in the grain are going to carry all the way through the distillation because of that, just because of the physical nature of that still. Whereas a column still, long, tall column, right? And at Still Austin, I think it's like 40, 50 feet high, right? It's enormous. Yeah. You have to climb several staircases to get to see the top of the thing. It's impressive and really cool, but it's stripping through plates along the way, as the spirit kind of reaches the top, and they
Mhm.
can calibrate this in different ways and pull off at different points to do what they want to do, depending on the type of spirit they're trying to make and what their goals are. But it produces a much you could almost call it a cleaner spirit, right? A
Yeah.
little, not neutral, like it still tastes like new make bourbon, but it's a little cleaner, it's less oily, it doesn't have that same viscosity, and it doesn't carry through quite as much of the base grain character that you started with as a pot still does. So that's why when you try something like a single malt scotch, for example, a lot of those can be very reminiscent of the grain they came from, right? It's malty.
Yeah.
Because single malt scotch is made in pot stills as well. So that's a big reason why. Now, if you're talking about other types of whiskey that's also made in Scotland, that's maybe not made in a pot still and it's not necessarily even made from barley, it'll have a much more neutral, less oily kind of character to it. And that's why when you try something like a blended scotch, like a Johnny Walker, for example, it gets some of that maltiness in there, but it's a lot more, it's a little thinner tasting and stuff like that. It's not as rich, not as grain forward or anything, because they're actually adding in that column stilled spirit in with the pot stilled barley based spirit. And so it kind of thins it out a little bit and gives it a little more of a neutral character overall. So does that kind of make sense? In a nutshell, you're dealing with something that's made in an entirely different process. And one of them is going to carry a lot of the character from the base grain you started with, and the other one is going to have something that's a little more neutral come out the other end.
Yeah. It's like kind of like the difference. Like a lot of Irish is like usually ran through 3 times, or a lot of bourbons ran through twice.
Right.
So like there's certain things where it's like the more work you put through the actual mash or the whiskey, the cleaner product it's going to be, and the cleaner the product is, the less flavor it's going to hold, and you get a cleaner product when you run it through a column still versus a pot still.
Right.
Essentially.
Exactly. And a lot of the reason why you'll find this in a lot of craft distilleries, first of all, a pot still has been run, for hundreds of years and in all different shapes and sizes and styles and stuff. So it's actually a relatively simple device when you get down to it. Of course, there's a lot to doing distillation really well, but you can run a pot still in your garage if you wanted to, not legally, of course, but you could.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Not that I'm recommending that, but you get my point. That if somebody wanted to start a small distillery with maybe a couple of people on staff or something, to run a pot still is a relatively straightforward procedure with what can be, especially for the smaller size, a relatively less expensive piece of equipment. It's still pretty expensive to run a distillery, of course, but if you're doing a column still, it's a big installation that's really complicated to calibrate and very expensive. The big benefit, one big benefit of running a column still is that it can run continuously. So long as you're feeding it effectively what starts as sort of distiller's beer, right? If you keep feeding it liquid, it'll keep spitting out whiskey 24/7, right? A pot still, you load it, you run it, you make cuts, you're sitting there monitoring it the whole time, and then you have to clean it and then load it again. So it's a very labor intensive, one run at a time type deal. Whereas a distillery like Still Austin can just keep making whiskey all day long, right?
Yeah, and that makes sense because Patrick, I don't know if you know Ventura Stills. I live like 5 minutes away from them, but like they have a column still as well as a pot still, and they use the pot still for all of their whiskey, and then the column still for their vodka and gin, I believe.
Sure, yeah.
I could be way out of line and speaking and things, so like don't quote me, but at least that's from what I've taken the tour a few times. So.
That makes sense. It's pretty common to make, vodka and gin that way.
Yeah. No, I've known Kelly for quite some time, and both his former partners, Chase and Jeff, Adventure Stills. And actually, Adventure Stills is part of the reason I got involved with Ironroot, because Robert had posted that he was coming to Phoenix and he was looking for recommendations. And I replied saying, "Well, welcome to my backyard. What kind of recommendations?" So, kind of like Josh said, he slipped in my DMs and he's like, "Hey, here's where we're coming. Here's where we're staying. What would you like to recommend?" I was like, "Well, here's some restaurants to go to. And as far as distilleries, I would absolutely say go to Adventure Stills." He went there, had a great time seeing everything, and he messaged it back and it's like, "Hey, if you're ever in Dallas, let me know. We'd love to have you up at the distillery." And so I took a trip to Dallas, got there on a Friday, and they stayed late and took me back into the barrel warehouse, and it was a late night. And then Saturday was back when they had their cocktail lounge, was their one weekend of the week or the month that they were serving there. So I hung out all day, and then the rest is kind of history. I showed up again for Kentucky Derby party with Josh and Gretchen and several other friends. And next thing I know, it's their 5th anniversary and they're releasing Icor, and Josh, Gretchen, and I are all working it.
Yeah. Man, there was reference made to the temporary tattoos from that party the other day. There were temporary tattoos made with a Texas flag in the background, and had Marsha's face on them, and it said the mother of Texas whiskey on it. And we all put it on our forearms. it was Roy Aquavite. He said he tried to not wash it in the shower for 2 weeks. So that when he got back to Scotland, he could keep it on for a little while.
No, that's awesome. I love those whole new temporary tattoo things. No,
I think I actually still have an unused one around here somewhere.
Man, that's a collector's item at this point.
Special edition right there.
That's right.
So kind of going back to something we talked about previously in this live stream. So I just tried let me see, what's this one? The Tri-Barrel Solstice Edition. This one's going to be 63.8% ABV, 54 months. So it's different from the weeded one I tried previously. This one, wildly different.
This was the first one.
I like this one a lot too. I mean, I feel like
we've already got 3 of your newest, most favorite bourbons. We have 4 now.
Yeah, I'm a broken record saying I love all these. I think I'm staying with Icarus. I think Icarus is my favorite.
Nice.
There's something lovely about that transition from the finished corn whiskey to the little bit of peat zinger at the end. It's a evolutionary whiskey, and you don't see that a lot.
Yeah, it's one that really tells a story, and those are my favorites. When it has an interesting transition, it's a little bit unexpected. It's something that evolves every time you take a sip. You have distinct transitions from the start to the mid palate to the finish, and lingering after that. And it's one that's I've heard people describe as Moorish, right? That makes you want to keep coming back for more.
Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna have to, stay away from that for a while. I don't want to get rid of that sample, but it's hard. It's hard not to go back for more.
Check online. They may still have some available, because that one is not exactly a fast seller, because most people see the peat and they're just not for me.
Yep.
So you might still be able to find some to order, but it's interesting, folks. That's where it's fun having both the 2 different solstice, where you can see, as Josh was talking about, how one is blended to a much heavier profile where the other was a much lighter profile. And you were saying how the first one on the weeded, you could see the lighter profile to it, where now you're seeing something totally different.
Yeah.
You'll find things in there that I can't remember exactly what went into that off the top of my head now, but my guess would be is at least some of what went into that Tri-Barrel blend was probably purple corn and French oak. Would be my guess. To be dark, heavy, dark dried fruits like that reads purple corn, French oak to me all the time. Although sometimes it can be surprising. Sometimes an American oak cast just turns really dark for some reason,
especially in Texas. But what I will tend to agree. It's reminiscent of a lot of French oak finish stuff I've had. So
Yep.
I'm going to agree there. I mean, obviously, you know far more than I do.
Hey, man, it seems like you've been nailing it this whole time. So maybe you got to give yourself more credit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like I've winged this 100% of the time, but we'll it works for us. I mean, it's one of those things where the whiskey community, especially if you find an amazing whiskey community, kind of like Arizona whiskey community. I've never been like shamed or anything for having opinions, because sometimes I have opinions that are less than agreeable, or people don't entirely agree with them. But like, it's one of those things where it's up to preference. And sometimes when you taste something, you're like, that tastes like peanut butter. And someone's like, that's jelly, bro. But like, if you think it's peanut butter to you, and that's all that matters. And you can't be wrong in that. There's no right or wrong. It's just, do you like it? Do you not? What do you get off of it? I could try something blind and get X tasting notes, and then you could try something blind and get completely different tasting notes. And that doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. It's just, that's what we're kind of reminiscing about when we taste that whiskey.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's the thing. There have been some people, because there are definitely a decent number of Ironroot fans here in the Phoenix Valley.
Oh yeah. Thanks to Patrick.
Let's try to help.
Every time we have a release, Patrick's like, hey guys, you might want to check this out. Hey guys, do this. And Patrick hooked me, and I've been hooked ever since.
But there have been some people who, because of the number of people who really like Ironroot and posting about stuff, have tried it, and they posted and said, I don't get it. I don't really like this. And personally, I take absolutely no offense to that, because that's the fun part about whiskey. There's so many different flavor profiles to play with and to try, and you don't have to like everything. And it's actually great, because that way, that's a few less people to buy stuff that I want to go buy. But yeah, that's the fun, and that's why I have way too much whiskey in here, because they all taste different, and they're all unique, and they're all.
That looks like the correct amount of whiskey.
Yeah.
Hang on, Josh. Does that mean you're buying that second cabinet to fill then?
I don't know about all that, man. I just know the room.
Depends if the wife is watching.
No.
She wants it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well then, all in.
Into it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's interesting. I'm really fortunate to have such a fantastic distillery to represent, because in a lot of ways it makes the job easy. You're coming in with a good product that something I believe in, and people seem to really enjoy. Then all you have to do is really share it with people. But I'll go into bars, restaurants, do tastings at clubs and people's houses or whatever, and for the most part, people really enjoy it, and they dig the story, and they dig the creative aspects of how it comes together and all that. But you get folks once in a while that go, yeah, no, that's not for me. Or sometimes people are way more rude than that, but but it is what it is, and it's that's the beautiful thing about whiskey is there's so much variety out there, and it's all incredibly subjective, right? So everybody can have their own preferences, and not everybody's going to like what you do, but enough people do seem to like what we're doing. So it's awesome to see people, especially experience it for the first time, especially if they've not had anything quite like that before. I had a gentleman, I did a tasting at my sister's house actually one time. She got folks, from her kind of neighborhood and friend circles and stuff to come over. And this one gentleman was billed as, this guy knows his bourbon, and he's going to be putting you on the spot and asking you questions. And I'm like, great, that's awesome. I would prefer somebody asking me a bunch of questions than somebody staring at me saying nothing. So. And this guy
start talking, and you're like, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. This guy, sure enough, asking me a bunch of questions and trying everything. And at first, he wasn't so sure. But I started like, hey, this is going to be different. It's because the pot still and the heirloom grains, and maturation environment, and here's what happens. And he started to kind of get it. And I think he tried one of the tri barrels, and he looked at me and he says, "Man, all right, that's better than Blanton's." I was like, okay. Oh, I wonder who that is. If that's that.
Oh.
That's probably
Welcome,
either Robert or
Ironroot.
Charlie.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's most likely Robert.
Yeah.
Cheers. Thanks for hanging out. Love your whiskey. Can't say that enough on this stream.
Yeah.
So far,
We're just
Robert,
taking over the top 5 favorite spots, I think, right?
Yeah.
The track record hasn't been bad so far.
Yeah. No, this Icarus and the, I'm going to try it, guys. The
Apotheosis.
I want to say apotheosis, but apotheosis is hard.
Well, actually, the person in chat is the one you can blame. It's Jonathan.
Wow. What's up?
Jonathan,
Dang.
love your whiskey. But that being said, you made all the names super hard for someone who didn't get a college degree like myself to pronounce. Okay, so still love your whiskey, but dang,
I'm pretty
look like an idiot on mine.
I'm pretty sure Jonathan got a 7,000 on his SAT or something.
Oh, no kidding. So yeah, when you talk about that Icarus, that flavor profile you like, that transition from the corn whiskey to the port to the peat, that's Jonathan. He is a magic. He has this magic about blending this stuff. That's just amazing.
Thank you for your service. Thank you. That was a plan. Oh, making it difficult on me.
Nice.
Yeah. So far from what I've tried today, I'm going to say, obviously, Icarus favorite. Apotheosis is second favorite, followed by, I'm going to go the 2 tri-barrels, because they're different. One's like darker and spicier, and the other one's kind of more light and luxurious, I guess, comparatively.
Yep.
It's more light and soft because it's the whole weeded flavor profile.
Exactly.
And then, I mean, the Kelt's also good. I can't pick a favorite. I'm going to go Icarus is my favorite, but honestly, like I said, I'm 110% in on the brand. Anytime you guys put a release in there, I'm like, hey, take all my money. It's like, I'll throw it at that.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much. And that's, it's crazy to share these things with people and see like beautiful reactions like that. And that's really what it's all about to me. The whiskey's fantastic and it's all interesting. And I love the brand and the people behind it and the people around it. And but to be able to share that with somebody and have them experience and have these kind of aha moments like you did with the Icarus is really just the most enjoyable part to me. It's like you're experiencing what drew me in. All right.
Yeah. And I would have to say, there's a lot of great whiskey out there, but a big part of it is the family behind it. The licorices are so welcoming and so much family. It's great to be part of that and great to get to experience that and also get to watch as their success grows. That is so much fun.
Yeah, it's just both crazy and beautiful to watch the evolution of everything here. It's pretty incredible. So big things coming down in the next few years from Ironroot. I can say that for sure.
Yeah, I'll for sure need to take a weekend trip to Texas here in the future, without a doubt.
Please do.
Preferably with someone to drive me. I'll need a chauffeur. That being said, we're going to have to wrap this up. I would love to. I feel like I could talk to you two for like hours and hours and hours. So I wouldn't mind having another live stream in the future, maybe when we get the new releases from this year and whatnot. So we can talk on those, kind of plug the newer releases a little bit more. That being said, any closing statements from both of you gentlemen?
Man, just be happy to come back again. It was a great time, and I think you talk about talking with somebody for hours and hours. It's that's part of what's just beautiful about whiskey in general and the whiskey community. And I think Patrick and I both kind of fall into this category where we're good at what we do here because we drink well with others, right? So,
yeah,
it's a community thing.
Absolutely, and I would echo a lot the same. It's a fun night. I appreciate you featuring Ironroot and enjoying Ironroot, and there's definitely plenty. You barely put a dent in your samples, so there's plenty more to discuss.
Yeah, I'm gonna baby them a little bit, but so thank you so much. One, Patrick, for all the amazing samples. Thank you, Josh, for making fantastic whiskey and Ironroot, or you on behalf of Ironroot. Thank you guys so much. Please, guys, do me a favor. Check out Ironroot. They're fantastic. They're making some amazing whiskey. But yeah, that's a wrap, guys. We will see you later. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
We'll see you later.
Cheers.